Hey guys. Well, here we are. Howdy, is that you? Let me hear your voice.
Hello. Is
Okay. I'm glad it was you. uh well, Chris,
Oh, you're not
as
going to check how if it's actually me. Okay, all right, I see how it is,
well,
Charles.
I sent you the link before anybody else, so I knew that. Thanks for coming, Smokey. Uh
Good to see
Chris,
you guys.
as we do, you're one of the debaters, so we defer to you. And and I don't think that what's his name is going to be coming in because he's got his own after show.
Yeah, he has his own.
Yeah. So all right. So well, where do y'all want to begin?
I gave my closing statement, so y'all can tell me how poorly that I did. The only thing I will say is I was expecting a lot more fireworks on Hebrews 6 and Hebrews 10. I was a little surprised that it focused so much on Hebrews 3. And I do think his best point, and I meant it when I said this is the argument he should have pressed, and I think he did a poor job pressing it. He could have pressed it and scored more points. Um, the
Did sh-
idea,
did
the
show your
enter
face real quick.
the entering argument, you can argue that the language enter means you're already outside. And so if you don't believe, if you're not going to enter, can imply they're already outside. Now, I think the response I gave is still the correct response. That about the lack of that's misunderstanding I'm tired now, so my brain is finally going away. The salient feature, I think that's a problem, and I also think that he's presuming a history. But I think that was a genuinely interesting argument that I did not see coming, and that was good.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't follow all of it because I was at work and then I was
Yeah,
driving home and then getting ready. But y'all went into other areas that I didn't go into with his debates, and then in some areas y'all went into the same area, and there's other things that I felt like if he had watched my debate with Dan Chapa, you know, he wouldn't have argued the way he did, or he would have
yeah,
figured that Free Grace had certain answers. You
yeah.
know. All right, a pseudonym. Oh, I need background music because it just seems weird. It's so quiet. Sorry, I don't have a better beat.
I literally recognize that beat as yours, Charles, so it's all good. It's like literally ingrained to you at this point. So
Well, then it works. Then.
It's you. It's you, man.
uh, so Chris, I don't want to get you into another debate. But you know, Smokey is of the more philosophically minded, and he is, for lack of a better term, a conditionalist. So he may want to come at things from that angle.
Mm-hmm.
But if you feel like you're too tired, you need to go somewhere or anything like that, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I've got some time. I can't promise I can stay here for a long time, but I've got some time.
Okay.
yeah, Chris, and by the way, I'm not like necessarily here to challenge you in any kind of like conditionalist format. It wasn't even really the part of the debate. Um, Charles, I don't know if you want to let me like have the floor, and I'll just give kind of my synopsis if you're cool with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So legit, when I first heard the announcement that this debate was going to happen, I basically completely discounted it. I wasn't even really interested. In fact, the only interest I had is when Charles said, "Hey, come by the after show," and I'm like, "Okay, well, come by the after show, then I'll check in a few times, like here and there." And this to me was Free Grace versus Free Grace Light. And one of the times I came in, I noticed like CJ had said something like, "Oh yeah, well this is going really, really well. We're like agreeing on most of this." And I could have called that from a mile away before the debate ever happened. And then you had said something that was beautiful and perfect because you're like, "Yeah, I think you and Turretin are basically right around the corner from being Free Grace yourselves. You're almost there," type thing. And I couldn't agree more. That's how I've seen CJ for years, being a reformed fatalist. So, when I had quoted, I think it was something in Matthew, it was Jesus saying, it was one debate I had with Matt Powell way back in the day. And CJ had exclaimed me as a heretic. And I asked him, I said, well, why am I a heretic? It's because I had read Jesus's words, hey, if you deny me, I will deny you before the Father. And I painted that in a debate as salvific. And just reading the words made me a heretic to him.
Right.
So he's right close to your line. I already knew that he was right close to your line. He's basically, again, like I said, free grace light, which is why I almost didn't even understand why this debate was even happening. So I think you did a good job. I think he basically conceded all the things that I knew he would. That kind of makes him, in my mind, almost like a closeted free gracer. And you ended up calling that out on one of the instances where I tuned in, where he's basically saying, oh, wow, look, this is going so well. I agree with almost everything you're saying. It just wasn't a necessary debate in my mind. So that's kind of my take.
I think that's probably fair. I think that CJ I want to be very careful, because if he watches this, I'm not trying to cast aspersions, cast shade, throw stones, any of that. CJ wants to be reformed, and he's trying to find that, as you know, Smokey, there's a range of reform views, right? Just like there's a range of free grace views. And I think he has been around long enough to figure out that some of the worst types of reform, like you see like in Piper and you see him in MacArthur, I think he sees the problems with those. And I think that he's trying to be a little more classical, and especially if you add some of the deterministic elements. I think that's where he ends up. And so he doesn't want to be free grace, and so he's trying to make a distinction that's just not there. The last thing I'll say is the fact that he is willing to concede the pastoral implication of you can apostatize for a little while. I think he needs to sit with the implication of that, because if you can apostatize for a while, then there is no principled reason why, if you can apostatize for 5 minutes, not 5 years, not 50 years, not until the moment you're dying, and in that moment God calling you back, you are effectively free grace. You are not allowed to say anything about sin or apostasy implying hell. At that point, you're just free grace.
I agree that, and at that point, I absolutely agree, and I understand his point, because again, you have this very almost fatalistic reform view where if you were truly elect or chosen to be elect or absolutely elect, you can fall away. And in their mind, there's something that's just going to happen that's going to pull you back to save you in some sort of context before you actually die, because you've been chosen as elect. So whatever you do, no matter what you do, whether you apostatize, worship the devil, go and live a life of lasciviousness, in his mind, if you were already regenerated to believe, and I don't know if you press this in the debate hard, but you absolutely could have, is like, in order to even get to the state of belief, and you both basically have the same definition of belief. Mm-hmm. So if you are pressed by the Holy Spirit to be regenerated, to be able to believe, then you're necessarily locked in and you are free grace no matter what you do. I don't know if you really pressed him on that, but it's kind of a necessary entailment of his position.
So I did not, because that wasn't the function of the debate. The only pushback I would give to you is, and I suspect this is strongly related to your personal view of free will.
100%, no doubt, 100%. Yep, absolutely.
So I would agree with you that he's closer to free grace than he realizes. I wouldn't say so on those particular grounds, because I think where you and I would disagree pretty bluntly and probably harshly, not harsh in the sense of like angrily, but like strongly disagree, is I don't think free grace at all in any sense denies free will. And so I don't think the denial of free will is what brings him to free grace. I think what brings him closer to free grace, whether he knows it or not, and I tried to talk about this, was trying to eat his cake and have it too. On the one hand, he says, oh, no, it's possible for believers to fall away and they won't lose their salvation. But on the other hand, it's just a portrayal. And it's that on the other hand.
It's the double talk, 100%. And I've called him out on it a million times. 100% double talk. I completely agree. Yeah.
If he were to purge the double talk out, which all of us have to do, if he were to purge that out and have to choose a side, I think ultimately he's going to come down on the side of eternal security and he'll be free grace.
I actually agree with you. I actually agree with you on that. I really do.
I had a couple thoughts.
Please.
One is I really enjoyed the it's not an argument you made, it's your presentation of an sort of a formal presentation of like maybe one of the intuitions that drives his interpretation of you know, the syllogism where he says, okay, well, this can be taken in two ways. Like if he means something like this, then it's invalid, and if it means and if he means this, then it's just false. I thought that was very clear, concise, illuminating. I really enjoyed that move. In terms of sort of like, I guess the heat of the argument during cross, it came a lot down to maybe a little bit of like, okay, well, who has the burden? And then I was interested in this like question begging thing. So question begging, like there's like a few interpretations of what it means. One, I think, is just to say that an argument is deductively valid because any deductive argument assumes the truth of its conclusions and its premises. Or maybe it's like a linguistic analytic tool where it's like, well, this is what I think the words mean. And so if you say it means something different, then you're question begging. Like that's the problem when you're making deductive arguments. They're all fundamentally, in my opinion, question begging, because you have to assume the truth of it to get the conclusion. But that's when I was thinking, well, I wonder if maybe appeals can be made towards other forms of inference. Like, I don't know. I've never seen this, but it just piques my interest. Like maybe someone could start like making Bayesian arguments, or maybe like abductive or inductive cases, because it seems like outside of that, like if we're just saying, okay, this is what the word means and this is how I interpret it, then that's going to be deductive. And then I'm not sure what you can do to motivate someone to accept an interpretation on those grounds. I mean, I'm sure there's ways of doing that, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, you're so technically and strictly you're right, but I think you also immediately know that the last thing you said is really what I'm trying to drive at. And I maybe you disagree. I don't think that pointing out the fallacy of question begging by assuming the thing you're trying to prove, that's not just because there are technical arguments with the way deduction works. I don't think that makes the charge invalid any more than Hume's problem of induction means, oh, there's a real problem here, but induction still works. So I think there's an interesting philosophical question. Clearly, deduction works, and clearly you can't beg the question. So that's your issue of inference is a really interesting philosophical question about how to ground it, and I suspect it has to do with justification and force. A common, that's the last thing I'll say about this. There's a common move that you're very well aware of, I'm sure, among philosophy of religion folk who say, they talk about the force of the argument. I don't feel, they say, the force of take your favorite argument for God's existence. That just doesn't move me, they like to say. So what's that about? Because clearly what that shows, at least for some people phenomenologically, is that deductive certainty does not guarantee movement. So what's that about? That thing probably, I don't want to be pejorative here, is psychological. There's something Bayesian, but there's also something about the values, and there's something axiological there. So my point with him is much more basic than all that. My point with him was just that in order to justify the distinctions he's making, you have to already buy the framework. So he's using the framework to find the justifications that he uses to support the framework. And that's what I'm arguing. Maybe I'm wrong, but that is what I'm arguing I'm not doing. I try to actually claim that I'm not doing that thing. I don't assert my once saved, always saved free grace framework in order to justify the distinctions I see in the text.
Well, I have a couple things, and I'll hand it over to, I don't know if Did, or I'm sure other people have things to say, but so yeah, you're saying something like, okay, well, on this formal analysis of question begging, all question begging is making a valid deductive argument, which is like what else do you want? Another way is saying, well, maybe it's the case that when presented with an argument, it has no force. And we're saying, okay, well, what makes a deductive argument good and another deductive argument bad, where there are like exemplary cases of, deductive arguments that like move you and ones that don't. And my thought on this is, well, I think what a good deductive argument tries to show is you take some subset of someone's beliefs, and then you show them something new, something novel or revelatory. So like someone's belief set isn't a theory because someone's beliefs aren't closed under a logical consequence. Like you don't know all the logical implications of all your beliefs. That's like, as a matter of psychological fact, impossible. But what you can do is have some set of beliefs, and then someone can bring to light that ideally you'd want to bring these beliefs that you hold lead to a contradiction, so that on pain of incoherence, you're forced to update and revise, assuming you like reject the conclusion. I think that's something that would make an ideal deductive argument. And then that's the end of my thoughts.
That would have to be an internal critique, right? Howdy, you're talking about the internal incoherency of the position, therefore forcing reconsideration of the presuppositions. Is that kind of where you're going?
I mean, that's like ideal, but I mean, it's very...
I think that's kind of what Chris did, actually. Realistically, in the debate, I think Chris did a good job pointing out, or at least doing his best, at least for the parts that I saw, that where CJ was standing on certain stances that were in complete and utter agreement with Chris, CJ was not following the necessary entailments therein. Like where Chris talked about earlier about the apostasy, like the very idea that you could apostatize for a time and still be saved undermines the whole substantial idea that the warning passages in Hebrew are serious, at least in terms to salvation. And this is where they met, like at a common ground, that where CJ felt some sort of, I don't know, instinctual pushback or something, but realistically was for the most part on the same page with Chris until he started double talking. That's what I saw for the parts that I witnessed. So,
okay. The last thing I'll say is I apologize, Heidi. I missed the last like 10 or 15 seconds, what you did. I think I caught it. So if this is relevant, great. And if it's not, correct me. Smokey's point, I did try to to show where this is just standard debate. I'm not going to go through that, but I think this is to your point. Like, let's just use the example of the confessing believer as opposed to the true believer. I think that's something he gets from his system, and I think what you're saying is something like, what is it that I think motivates that, and what is it that he thinks motivates that, and then you have to figure out. So you may not mean this, but I'm thinking of Quine's notion of a web of beliefs. How do you, and maybe that's not what's on your mind at all, but how are those ideas connect? And then to get somebody to feel the force, you have to put a stone there where they feel like this idea doesn't connect with this thing that I also already believe. And that's part of our job as debaters and persuaders, is to get the other person or the audience to accept something as probably true that doesn't fit in that web of beliefs. I don't know if that's what you're thinking, but that's what I'm kind of hearing you say insofar as before my audio went out. That was the connection I made.
Yeah. So, I mean, to reiterate, I think when evaluating arguments, I think, in my opinion, better deductive arguments have this, because it was like, okay, well, what makes an argument good and an argument not so good? Because I can make, lots of deductive arguments that people aren't going to find persuasive. And I was thinking, in my opinion, it has something to do with the fact that you're bringing something to light, something novel that they have not considered. And I think ideally you would take some set of their commitments and then derive some contradiction from the logical consequence of them.
Like the Moses example.
I'm a bit pessimistic on arguments for a couple of reasons, though. One is you can always like Morrison shift. So like, yeah. I think he brought this up too. I don't know if he meant it like this, but he said like you can say like A implies B, A therefore B, and then Well, someone can always, flip that and say, well, I can always say, well, not B, therefore not A. So
for every modus ponens, there's a modus tollens. Yep.
I made a joke in the chat. I said that sounds like a commodus bolens. Yeah, that's the extent of my philosophy.
but I was thinking like, oh, go ahead.
Did you gonna talk?
I want to talk. My brain is not functional right now for various reasons.
You said you had nightmares, right?
Yeah.
Man,
I have some thoughts, but I don't think I'm going to be able to articulate them.
Okay. All right.
Well, for what it's worth, Dit, I appreciated you asking and pressing on the sanctified issue in chapter 10. If we had ever gotten to chapter 10 and I had a chance to cross on that, because Charles knows my personal rule, I could have just done it, but I always focus my cross on what things people say. If he had talked about that, I would have crossed his chapter 10 on that issue. So I appreciate you raising it because it got to let me get an argument that he didn't make. So I appreciate that very much.
Mm-hmm.
Smokey, you want to interact with this? I guess he went to sleep too.
I want to ask though, if because the contention seems to be my interpretation versus your interpretation, and let's assume for the sake of this argument that both systems of interpretations are internally consistent but mutually incompatible. Mm-hmm. So we know that someone's right and someone's wrong, but we can't tell who on the basis of deriving a deductive contradiction from either. And I was thinking, assuming that, what's the form of the inference we're going to make to privilege an interpretation to sort of adjudicate? Like, are we trying to make, in your head, I want to get your opinion on it. Do you approach it as like, well, let's just say like free grace or whatever you want to call it. Do you think that it expresses some theoretical virtues and you'd want to take like an inference to the best explanation, or did you have something else in mind?
So the way that I tend to do it, a little more linguistically oriented, and this is going to be Bayesian, and I'm trying to be fancy when I say that. This is problematic in itself, but all argument is at this level. I think it's about naturalness. I have often said that, and that's the thing to your point about deductive arguments, people are super creative, and if you give somebody enough time, they can come up with a philosophical, theological deduction, justification for just about any wild claim. And the question, again, just let people be creative and they'll get there eventually. So at some point, what you have to do is go back to the source material, and you have to do the much harder work. And this is as much moral as anything else. And you have to ask yourself, what's the natural reading of this? The problem with that approach is, well, then that's an argument itself, which just gets you back into it. Well, that's just a general problem about knowledge as a whole. And so epistemologically, I'm a critical realist and not a naive realist, so Bhaskarian. But what I would just say is, I think it's just obvious that there are some readings that are more natural than others, and we can argue on the borderline, well, this is more natural than that, but let's just take my argument. He can disagree. I think it's possible to be wrong in serious disagreement. The suggestion that unbelievers are called sanctified, the suggestion that unbelievers are called sons of God and children of God, the suggestion that unbelievers are waiting for a kingdom, the suggestion that unbelievers are they've partaken of the heavenly gifts, they've tasted the ages. I realize that Calvinists have answers to all those, but cumulatively to suggest that's the natural way that you would read those, I think is just wrong. It's false that that's the natural way. So shy of any strong reason not to take in the natural sense, I think that's strong empirical reason that you should not adopt the Calvinist view. I think that's, whether that counts as a theoretical virtue, I think naturalness is really important in something like this.
Yeah, there is a theoretical virtue of like how a theory sort of is incorporated by, there's lots of words you can throw out. You can say like common sense or like the everyman's picture of the world or something like this. But there's one worry I have is that, well, I would suspect that people aren't holding positions that they take to be the quote unnatural reading of the text.
Right.
So
right. Of course.
In
And that's
term- in
what I
term-
said. Yeah, he's allowed to disagree and say, well, I think your view is the unnatural one. Okay, but that's fine, but let's have a conversation about it, because it's entirely possible. And I admit this right here. I'm actually admitting this for real. It is possible that what I think is natural is not natural. But that doesn't mean relativism. People can be wrong, but that doesn't mean because I can be wrong that there's any credence in the claim that I am wrong. So what you do is you look at the evidence, you look at how things are used. This is why you have a community of interpreters. And I know that you're not requiring infallibilism, but I'm a fallibilist, and I don't think that we have to assume that because knowledge is not 100% guaranteed, because I don't have 100% certainty that I have any given proposition correctly interpreted, that doesn't therefore mean that I can't have confidence of any particular claim.
Yeah, I was mainly just considering the form. Like, I'm sure we can envision paradigmatic cases where if I say the cat is on the mat, plausibly that means the cat is on the mat and not there's a starship 50 miles away doing blasts into.
Correct.
Sure. And maybe there's going to be disputes about how many moves are being made by each side and to what extent.
And that's where the dispute happens, and that's exactly right.
The other thing that you said was because you'd mentioned. I mean, I had introduced the Bayesian, and you had sort of, assented to it in some sense. And I was thinking, if we're doing something like this, I take this to be something like priors, weighing priors and posteriors, and doing like evidence that confirms hypotheses. And so the structure of this would be something like if on the hypothesis that free grace is true, these are the verses like these are what we would expect. And then when we see these verses,
Correct.
They confirm that hypothesis. And so doing this sort of
Correct.
battle where...
And if Calvinism is true, you would not think it to be come across in this way, and yet that's the way it comes across. So that counts against the prior. Your posterior then has to Yeah,
there's one I was kicking around different forms of this. One is, or what different contents, I should say, of this kind of argument. I was thinking something like, well, suppose that supposing that doing sin X, as a believer, sends you to hell or whatever. And I was thinking, on that hypothesis, I would expect that to be mentioned as one of the reasons not to.
Yeah.
Like suppose Paul knew that all the things he says not to do, that doing these things like condemns you eternally. Like I would expect him to mention that. That's something like, and then the lack of that, because that hypothesis expects that evidence, and then that evidence that not being there would lower the probability of that. So were you thinking you could make an argument along those lines about Hebrews, or what's your general? I'm saying big picture, and maybe it's hard to. Yeah.
No, I think that's right. And somewhere in my prep notes, I don't have that exactly, but I have something like it. And the something like it version is this is a pastoral epistle, and as a pastor, so that's why that the leftover from that argument was the initial slide when I was laying out the kind of showing that everything was a unified picture. And my point was, since it's a pastoral epistle, he is going to say those things that are necessary for his audience to know. The fact that he doesn't warn them explicitly about hell, and worse, the fact that he gives them multiple reasons to think that hell might not be in view. And the two particular examples I had in mind was the restorative metaphor for the first thing, and the disciplining of the children in chapter 12 is the capstone warning. Both of those, to me, work strongly against hell as a natural interpretation. So either, and again, this kind of made it through the debate, either the author contradicted himself, and or he is a very poor communicator if he was trying to show you could lose your salvation. Instead, what he should have done was just say somewhere very clearly that hell was in view, and there's lots of ways to do that. So I think that's not as clear as what you were suggesting, but the structure is the overall similar structure. If Calvinism were true, he should have said, or if conditionalism was true, they should make hell explicit. They don't because they're not thinking about hell. And that can be framed in your Bayesian structure. And I think that's exactly right.
How much of this of this battle do you think
Could I
hinges
real
on?
quick respond
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
that? Real quick. Like, I think that's a little bit of an argument from silence. If there had been direct communication in multiple instances, verbal or written, and even insinuating an understanding of the idea that what Christ was communicating, non-dispensational, was talking about consequences for disobedience in terms of action more than just affirmation of proposition. The assumption in the writing is that the carry through would be that this has a salvific context. So kind of saying, well, they didn't state it explicitly is kind of, I think, over assuming intent in the letter, because they very well may have had intent and assumption to the contrary that you don't know, that you're just assuming from an argument from silence.
I have just to clarify, under like a Bayesian analysis, it's not that any position is falsified. All that happens is you lower the probability, and maybe it's like disputable, like how much, like maybe the fact that the epistles don't mention the lake of fire, we can argue maybe that's, I mean, at least 0.001% less likely now at this point. I mean, it would be sort of I don't know what sort of story you would give to dispute even like any confirmational role of that evidence.
Yeah, the problem, so to build on what Howdy was just saying, the argument as I was structuring it, particularly in light of Howdy's comments, is not an argument from silence strictly. And I mean this strictly, it's not. If the argument was presented as a deductive argument, therefore it can't refer to lost salvation for those reasons, it would have to refer to it. That would be an argument from silence. The argument is instead an argument about the expectations. So given this theory of reality, what is the expected evidence that you should find? That's a valid form of reasoning that we've already mathematically demonstrated to be true. I mean, Bayesian reasoning is everywhere, and it's 100%. It's completely true. AI works on it. So what I'm presenting is an argument for assuming this is the hypothesis. What is the likelihood of the evidence? Well, now you can say, well, actually, I disagree with your weighting of what that evidence should be. That's perfectly legitimate. But then the nice thing is you get to make your position, you get to make your assumptions very clear. That's what makes Bayesian reasoning very powerful. So it's not an argument from silence. It's a question of how you weigh the prior probabilities and what your justification for those prior probabilities are.
That I agree with. And I think that's where the argument lies, are the prior probabilities about this book, in terms of its entirety of compilation, is either interested in telling you predominantly or absolutely about salvation, or it's pretty much all about just what you need to do to get rewards from God in heaven beyond salvation. This is kind of where the two splitting comes from with the two propositions. Like you kind of almost think and can take, especially if you have some sort of conclusion. And it's not even necessary. I'm not saying, when I say presupposition, I'm not saying it's arbitrary or unjustified, but you have a presupposition that free grace is true. So you would look at the lens of Paul's writing as if he is adopting that same perspective. So when he's not being explicit, you're almost including the idea that, well, he's thinking free grace when he's writing, so of course he's not gonna be explicit, as opposed to he doesn't need to be explicit because the explicit communication has already been communicated prior. This is the division between the two positions, as far as I can see.
The only pushback I'll say on that, and this is just a testimony, and you can say I'm wrong, lying, or naive, and that's okay. I will admit to you that is a danger that I and anybody else faces in any theological system whatsoever. Having admitted that danger, I will say to you, I do not read Paul assuming he's teaching free grace. I'm telling you I'm aware of that, and I'm testifying to you that I do not do that intentionally and on purpose.
I agree. I don't think you're doing it intentionally by any, and I wouldn't accuse you of such, Chris. Nonetheless, the possibility of personal confirmation biases is basically unavoidable.
I disagree, and I appreciate, again, that's where
but you understand no one can be purely perfectly objective. You agree with that, at least, right?
That's where the Bayesian priors help if you take the time to work it out. But that's why I said the naturalness argument is important. And I'll be that pedantic guy. There's a difference in confirmation bias and anchor bias. You're really worried more about anchor bias than confirmation bias. I'm aware of those things. Because I'm aware of those things, I'm just, again, you can say I'm naive. I'm not, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, but I'm testifying to you that's not the case. I am harder on my own epistemic standards precisely because I'm aware of these particular worries. I could make arguments that other people are more than happy to make, and I don't make them because I regard them as subject to anchor bias. So I don't make them.
I was thinking it'd probably be strange if anyone maybe it's a bit unclear what's being said here, but I mean, to me, it would seem strange if anyone assumed some soteriological position. Like it's sort of like a complicated thing, you know, like for right or wrong reasons, someone might, you know, assent to something, but at the level of from how complex something like that is, it's just, I don't think anyone like just as like you.
Well, Howdy, real quick, just so you understand, a big contention here is Paul, when he's writing to everyone, is he caring about, like, is he talking in a soteriological context, or is he just committing to a bunch of people who are already locked in and saying, hey, this is just how you get rewards? These are like these two dichotomies. Like, what is Paul's intention? Like, this is a big part of this. Like, why is Paul writing these letters? Is it to help the people be soteriologically, secure and writing just about salvation? Or is he just spending all this time to tell them how they get stuff in heaven? What's the real purpose? This is a big part of this.
Yeah, my only thought was I'm not sure how someone could assume one of the two of those before anything, like prior to any empirical observation. Like, it's just assumed that it's because I suspect that people wouldn't even have those concepts coming in, like those concepts.
Or you argue from the context that it's consistent with whatever Christ taught, and you're thinking it's a carry through. So it's not like it's free of context. It's not like you're left to a pure arbitrary decision. You're just taking the evidence and deciding how you want to interpret it. Is Paul abrogating Christ, or specifying that Christ's teaching was just to the Jews and we are free by grace in this preview? Or is Paul elaborating and continuing forward and demanding compliance and obedience? You know, what is Paul's intent? This is argued throughout. And one says, well, you know, Paul is basically setting up a paradigm of antinomianism when Christ was preaching to the Jews and was requiring works. These are very like hard lines to have to divide in soteriology.
Sure. I actually had a question related to the debate on the Hebrew stuff. I was thinking, how much of this do you think hinges on the audience of the epistle? I instead of throwing a bunch of questions, I'll just ask that.
So I think it's definitive on the audience. Where do you mean by the audience in terms of, like, we didn't get into this at all. If you mean audience by whether or not the people are true believers, that's why I spent the first 6 minutes of my opening statement trying to establish that as a primary thesis of the two. The other question is the historical reconstruction question about them being Jewish people just before 60 AD in Palestine who are suffering persecution and therefore considering going back to the law. I think that is an incredibly helpful context. I don't think that is an entirely necessary. I think it's very clarifying, but I think you can get by without understanding the specific historical reconstruction.
I guess more specifically, when he uses second person pronouns, like you. Yeah.
He tells you some things, like I mentioned Hebrews 10, like he tells you that you talking to them, you did all these things. You held fast. You were there with me in my chains. So there is some reconstruction you can do inside the letter itself, and I think that's important. That's to me is just part of exegesis.
Do you think from the text it bears any one way or the other, whether, because I mean I guess it could be the case that you and over here is different than you over there, but I should say in like in the relevant context under dispute, because those do appear in these. I was thinking
I would say, yeah, appealing again to my naturalness criteria. What's the most natural way to take the word "you," for example, in any given context? And I think it's a single. I think I showed, or at least gestured toward, it's a single unified pastoral argument. The way pastoral arguments work is it's not an encyclical. It's to a specific community. I think his idea is just terribly anachronistic of having all these kinds of different people under the same roof. And so then you can start saying within the text, well, then what do these people do? And now you are building a profile of the kind of people the audience are. And then what does that say about them?
One of the things that he said was weird, but then trying to steelman his position, maybe my intuitions have relaxed a bit on this, where he says, well, like the warnings you can, to your lights, the person has to sort of contort a little bit to say something like, well, these are hypothetically two believers who can't do the thing in question, or they're two unbelievers as a way to motivate believers, or some people even say like reading these words as like some sort of like voodoo magic, like causes the mind of the believer to do good or something. Yeah. And I was like, okay, maybe this is unnatural, but I was thinking, surely it's possible that you can like warn unbelievers in a way. Like unbelievers have been warned throughout, different places. Like you can say like anytime there's a prophet that says change your ways or something bad's going to happen, and then something bad happens, those people were in fact like insensitive to the message. And so
that particular argument which is what Turtevin tried to use, and that's what CJ was at least partially was trying to make, at least as I interpreted him, was, well, yeah, this is the means by which God is, whoever he's talking to, he's using this to, therefore the warning will catch, so to speak, with the elect, and they're going to come back because of the warning. It's a means of grace. But that's fine as far as a structure. I think it doesn't work at the level of the text, because the text says things like, if a man is sanctified by the blood of Christ and then tramples that underfoot and counts it a common thing, then he's going to die in the fiery judgment of God. Well, that's not an unbeliever. It's because the unbeliever was never sanctified by the blood of Christ. It's to take one of like a dozen examples. So what that means in practice is it turns into a hypothetical, or you are warning the believer about something that in principle can never happen. So the point about God warning unbelievers to motivate believers is entirely true. But I think that when he does that, he's clearly talking to unbelievers. The book of Hebrews, by my reading, naturally is read as a threat to believers. If you do this thing, this is going to be the consequence.
I was because I'm still making my way through Greek, I was wondering how unnatural it would be to read the antecedent of that being Christ, rather than the one, because it says like who is sanctified, because the nearest antecedent, I mean, I have to pull it up, but doing that, you guys can talk about something.
I don't have that text memorized in terms of the Greek or what the nearest antecedent is, so Charles is good at that. I don't want to look at Greek. I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm tired too. But J. Paul Tanner, he talks about that issue in his Hebrews thing and his papers on that. So I know some Reformed people, that's what they try to say, is that Christ is the one that is sanctified. I can't remember his argument against it.
I'll look into it myself later. It's probably a bit too technical for this.
Okay, I'll send you that paper also.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be dismissive of an argument. How I am just.
No, I didn't even present it. I don't even like. It's hard for me to pull it up to my lips.
Smokey, is there anything else you want to ask about free grace in general?
I mean,
Do your thing.
I mean, the stuff I would ask would be kind of like off from the debate. This is an after show for the debate. I'm not here to like challenge Chris into some like conditionalist showdown after he's had a full. Come on, you'd be into it anyway.
They can go. Charles has said they can debate after shows can take on anything they want to do.
No,
Yeah.
I know. But I'm respectful of the format and all that. And
Well,
here's the thing. I'm also a debater, Chris. I remember the mental taxation of going through a full debate and then doing an after show, and I'm respectful of that. I can be very, very directly empathetic to that. I'm not here to have you do some throwdown or get some sort of gotcha or a clip or something. So that's not what I'm here for. I came by because Charles invited me. I wanted to get my take on the debate. I think I kind of did that. I do think you did a better job than CJ. I've been respectful of CJ's double talk for many years. I've known CJ for going on 5 years now. So like I've had an issue with his fatalism, his reform, his definition of reform, how he is basically, and I've even accused him of such in the past, of basically being free grace light. So even when I heard the announcement of the debate and the topic, to me, I wrote it off as a waste of time. I figured you guys would end up agreeing with more than you disagreed with, and that kind of is what happened. Even to the point of the debate where you're both basically admitting as such. So none of this was really any kind of surprise to me. Naturally, I've debated against free grace and any type of OSAS for a long, long time. Never really held it except for a brief time in my youth, and moved beyond that. I'm not trying to pull you into all that. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the fact that you do these debates and then you show up for the after shows. It's a lot of generosity to your time and stuff, and I'm going to show graciousness to that as well. And I know you're tired, so I just want to say you guys did good overall. It was interesting, Chris. I would love. I don't know if it'll manifest at some point because I'm basically blackballed from SFT's channel for formal debates. But if an opportunity ever arose to debate you professionally, I would absolutely take the opportunity. So, we could put that at a later date. Conditionalism versus free grace, whatever, that type of thing, I would do it. So thank you for taking the time. You've been real generous, even with the after shows and the panels that Donnie's done, and you've engaged with me. So I appreciate you. I really do.
Well,
My
if the
pleasure.
band
Thank you.
stays on SFT's channel, we can do it over here. It's fine.
And by the way, Christian King will also host me for a debate, Charles. So if SFT says no, I know he'll host our debate. So if you want to, do that too, that.
Well, you've been coming to the open mics and stuff, so you never know. It's like I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I really don't want to address it.
Sure, I get it.
You see, there's comments in the chat right now, but my approach is, look, you let authorities deal with that. It's not for Christians.
I get it. Yeah. No, and Chris, just so you know, me and SFT had some friction in the past, specifically over free grace versus conditionalism. So he had kind of blacklisted me a while back. But I'm always open to debates. I am a debater. Charles knows that. And Charles and we're going to do something here soon too, I think, once we kind of nail down a topic and all that. So I have an idea of the topic I want to do. We just need to fine tune it. But Chris, I'd love to have an actual professional direct one-on-one with you at some point instead of these open panels, chaos type stuff. So, if that can arise in the future, I appreciate it. And I thank you for taking the time. This was good. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Chris, can you do this? Can you tell Smokey a little bit about your experience with free grace? How are you a representative of free grace academically, organization-wise, other things like that? Because Smokey's had the unfortunate experience to interact with people identifying as free grace, but
I
haven't been the best
from our last I kind of gathered from our last interaction. So I was a really, really, really hardcore Lordship Salvation guy in most of my life. Probably from the age of about 12 to the age of about 25, when I had a pretty dramatic conversion to free grace. And I won't go into my story of why. It was a Paul scale from your eyes, one of those moments. And there was definitely a lot, to Howdy's earlier point. My reading of scriptures there definitely had a lot of confirmation bias. I was relearning an entire theology. I was brought to free grace under the ministry of a guy named Hal Haller. And then through him, I got involved with the Grace Evangelical Society, specifically a guy by the name of, not Bob Wilkin. I never really got super excited about Bob Wilkin. Ken Yates. His commentary on Hebrews was absolutely fantastic. So I spent about 10 years just kind of in GES circles, but I never really got on board. Like, I briefly played a little while, but like my last paper, my undergrad, was like a 30-page analysis of Zane Hodge's arguments or the content of saving faith. And I concluded back then, this is back in 2009, that he was wrong. So I got associated with a group called FGA, Free Grace Alliance. And I realized pretty quickly, after 20 years of what's called a content of saving faith debate, I'm sure you know of it. Or you should know about it. I decided it was just all nonsense. I became a chaplain at that point. I'm a traditional Schaefferian. And as a Lucifer Schaefer, or I tend to follow Ryrie. There's some things I do Ryrie on, but like I have a more holistic approach. My thing is actually more narrow, and I think some people maybe on this panel will disagree, but I think there's a narrow notion of free grace and a broad notion of free grace, and this is where the guys you were interacting with are very, in my opinion, very wrong. For me, the narrow view of free grace, which is the proper view, is really just it's a Lordship salvation question. Must you declare Jesus Christ to be Lord of your life in order to be saved? Is that part of faith? If so, your Lordship salvation. If not, if you think that that's a discipleship matter, then you're free grace. Once you have that established, there's all kinds of things that follow out after that: eternal security and the content of saving faith and assurance, and all that stuff to me is what you might call a thick free grace. I don't think that's necessarily intrinsically a part of it.
By the way, that's amazing that you mentioned that, Chris, because honestly, if there was a debate I would want to have with you more than anything, it would be the content of saving faith. That would be it. That would be the one.
I would be perfectly happy to discuss that, because what I will tell you is my view of the content of saving faith is not the standard free grace view, because I don't think that the definition of free grace hinges on a content question, nor do I think it hinges on the nature of faith question. I think those are relevant. Those are splits within the free grace community. I have a particular view of, I don't think faith has a content at all. I think faith has an object. And I think that there's a philosophy of mind, intentionalism. I think that there is a philosophical of reference. I think reference points you as an intentional object toward a thing, and that content is necessary. And I'll use some technical language. You'll know this stuff. It's epistemologically necessary so that you can establish a relation that can obtain. But that's just the technical speak for.
We're actually mostly on the same page there with what you just said. So an object as opposed to a proposition. Interesting.
Exactly. So I don't hold to a propositional view of faith. So people like Bob Wilkin are just wrong about that. Faith is, that's what I was trying. I couldn't get into.
like the original Zane Hodges thing, as far as I understood it, was just believe you have eternal life from Jesus and you're good.
Right,
you know?
And that's just wrong.
And
that's one of the free grace views, but that's not free grace at all. And I don't.
Right. And I know there's lots of arguments and disagreements, and then expansions thereon. But like, the idea is, again, it does come back to that original core, substantial idea of. Well, here's the thing: once you boil faith down to saving faith, once you boil it down to affirmation of propositions. Now you have the challenge of which propositions. What are the propositions? And I appreciate what you said, because you're kind of like overstepping that, because you're kind of like, well, hey, the object.
Yep.
nonetheless, even to the object, there's still, well, what about the object? These now become part and parcel to the direction of the faith. And I find that very interesting to explore, actually.
Yeah, then I've done real work, nothing published yet. It's one of the things I want to write up and publish once I finish. Once I finish the current dissertation, I have an entire project on. It's a 3-part project. I'm doing a phenomenological analysis, and I mean that in Husserlian sense. I'm doing an eidetic analysis of faith, and then a lexical analysis of faith. This is on the plan anyway. And then I'm going to do a phenomenological analysis of faith, where I'm talking the social sciences, and they're going to cross-pollinate in very rigorous ways. And the goal is for questions like what you just raised there. If there's a relational element of faith and there's a propositional element of faith, which grounds which, and how do you know on what basis, and what does that look like? And then why does the linguistic pattern reliably reproduce what it does in what patterns do we see? So it's just a bunch of technical speak, but my point is, to your point is, what saves me is not, I'm not a Gnostic. What saves me is not having a list of propositions in a particular order, as if I get the right, I take a test and I get all the right answers. What saves me is a man named Jesus Christ. Now, I have to know enough about him, and this is just a human limitation, and that's all that it is. I have enough about him that I can point my faith at him. Well, what do you have to know? There's not a necessary thing necessarily that you have to know, but there's a sufficient set, and that's the kerugma. And so if you know that this is the man who, and here's the things you have to know: he died for your sins because you're a sinner, and he rose from the dead, and he's this Messiah, son of God. Those are the sorts of things. That's the man. And you place your reliance upon him, then the Bible just tells me and informs me of the fact that if I put my faith in that man, then I have everlasting life.
Yeah, I just wanted Smokey to get, exposure.
Yeah, no, and by the way, Chris, I appreciate that. The thing that I want to clarify, especially from like my position too, is like, and I have this idea that like when it's directed to the object, to me, the concept of the idea of the direction to the object of like faith, faithfulness, it has this idea of this relational dynamic.
Yes, I agree.
Like kind of where, I could affirm for instance, I could affirm the proposition that, and I'm just like, let's say I'm living in a kingdom, and I affirm the proposition the king exists, but I also affirm the false proposition that I can do whatever I want and the king will never punish me.
Yep.
Now, I'm still putting faith in the king. I'm still putting complete trust in the king, but I'm doing so with an incorrect precept. One of my propositions that I've affirmed is true and an entrusting is false.
Yeah. Yep.
So this is where, again, I want to explore this idea, because when you're talking about the object, to me, you can't divorce proper affirmations about the object when you're even directing that faith at the object. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do, and I'm not gonna. I don't want to argue with you right now, but just to let you know the way
I get you. Yeah.
Where my mind is going. So I don't know how familiar you are. I know you clearly have some education here, but there's a difference in a descriptivist versus a causal model. There's like 7 major models of linguistic theory. So when you claim you can't have false propositions, that looks to me very much like a descriptivist model of reference, and there are very, very strong reasons not to be a descriptivist. So I'm not a descriptivist on reference. I'm an intentionalist. And I think that but
you do affirm you need to affirm some correct propositions about Christ in order to have faith directed at the object effectively.
Yes, but the question is and the yes but is important here. What is the relationship between those propositions and the reality? Because you can do the descriptive this thing, you can do the naive direct reference thing, which I'm not that either, or you can do the Garth, what's his last name? I forget his last name right now because I'm Garrett Evans. You do the Garrett Evans thing, and say, well, it's a dossier and you have to have some arbitrary, say 51%. I think all of that is wrong. So this is an issue that linguists and philosophers of language are struggling with. And I think historically, this is my assessment, I could be wrong. The reason they're struggling with it is because philosophers of language since Wittgenstein have taken an anti-realist turn, and they don't want to introduce intentionalism. And so they're trying to find a self-contained theory of language. And that has seriously, in my assessment, hampered the ability to do a proper theory of language. But if you don't have a proper theory of language, you can't have a proper theory of faith, because for me, faith, like language, is a pointing device. It has an object. So words have objects. We're speaking about something. We're thinking about something. Faith is about something. So until you get your intentionalism down pat, you're not going to be able to work out the precise relationship between descriptive propositions and as intellectual scaffolding to get to the object in question.
Well, but even if I direct it at the object, like the idea is that I'm expecting the object to still do something. There's a proposition therein.
Yep.
Like it's prepackaged. Like it's almost unavoidable. Like I can trust my wife to wake me up if there's a fire in the house. I can't trust my wife to carry me out of the house because she's half my size. Exactly. So there's almost essential, unavoidable entailments describing what is even being entrusted to the object. I'm sorry. I don't mean to drag you into this whole thing. Okay. I'm so sorry.
The only reason that I'm engaging so much on this case is because one of my doctoral research classes, I was able to do some original research on this subject, and there's very few people that want to talk about the phenomenology of faith, much less the underlying.
I love to. That's one of my favorite topics, actually. So anyway, yeah.
But I will say with you, yes, there is a relational element of faith, my own claim, and it's a claim. I think I have some evidence for it, but it doesn't have.
It's still a product of fallible epistemology leading to a conclusion that you have adopted as true, as a justified true belief. 100% we're on the same page there.
Yes. So my general claim is that any faith statement is always going to be stated as a proposition, and that any faith proposition is going to be grounded in a more fundamental relational element of faith. But that relational elements of faith can be with respect to.
Can you define that? Can you define that relational element? Can you give it a word if you were going to give it a word?
A synonym? Yeah, sure. So a proposition. Let me do proposition.
No. I mean the relational. Like you're talking about the relational to the object. Yeah. How do you define?
I think he's looking for like trust or something.
Yeah, like trust, commitment, fidelity, faith, whatever.
I have a 6-part definition of 6. There are 6 elements that, as far as, and I have to pull the eidetic analysis back up that I've already done, but it is the central core category is dependence, but it's also it's teleological dependence, so it's dependence toward some specific outcome. Or I could also say dependence towards some specific or general outcome, such that it leaves one vulnerable in that respect. So that's like 4 of the elements.
And that would require the presupposition prepackaged therein that the relational dynamic is secure no matter what you do. That would have to be affirmed in order to draw that bridge to the object, right?
I'm not going to say no. I don't think it requires that particular presupposition.
Because you have to define the type of entrusting you're doing. Like if you say, I entrust the object, you still have to define the type of entrusting you're doing in a proposition in order to draw the bridge.
And so, but the kind of relationship is going to be the kind of dependence is with respect to the characteristic of the thing that you're trusting. So the way I trust is the way I trust my wife is different than the way I trust my memory, the way I trust but to me it's faith.
Right. There's definitions there, and there's presuppositions that draw that bridge between what I trust my wife. Okay. Trust your wife for what? Right. Again, I trust my wife to wake me up if there's a fire. I don't trust my wife to carry me out of the house half my size if it's burning.
Exactly.
So I do trust when I say I trust my wife, I trust my wife within the confines of the capacity, and there's a series of propositions therein. That I have to affirm and understand, and based upon logic and reasoning and deduction, hopefully, that I am coming to the conclusion of appropriate trusting. When I say I trust my wife, that it fits
motivated
within
trust. Yeah,
range and
absolutely.
context, right? Okay.
Yeah, where I might disagree, I'm not saying I do, where I might disagree, if I'm interpreting you properly, is I don't know that I would claim, I know that I would not claim that any faith proposition that is true, that constitutes faith. So you had mentioned all these propositions. I don't think that you can reduce faith, and the word reduce is probably pejorative, but I don't think you can reduce faith to a set of propositions, because again, propositions have content, and I don't think faith has a content. Propositions can describe a particular respect that concretizes the particular aspect of faith according to which I'm relying upon, but the faith itself is general, the object is specific.
Do you have a division in your mind between a real relationship and a fake relationship? Is there some sort of like, have you ever kind of thought about that before? Like, because I love how you're kind of painting a lot of this as like really like pure relational dynamics. It's actually kind of like a common foundation we have here.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like wondering, like, have you parsed the idea of like, what would it be to have a real relationship and a fake? Like, what do those look like? Like, what does that kind of work out in your mind?
Yeah, I wonder what you mean by fake relation. And the only reason I'm asking the question, this is truly exploratory, is because when I hear the word real relation, I have a very, that means a lot of very specific things. Yeah. So I don't know.
Right. I get you. Like I could have a real relationship that I'm faking. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Okay.
Like,
yeah, no, I think, yes. I think that you can act as if you have a real relation. So they're performative relations. And this is off the top
and so just to be really clear, just to draw the true dichotomy, can you have a real fake relationship? I guess we'll just make it clear.
I don't, off the top of my head, that would seem incoherent.
Right. So like, would you draw the line that definitively, like, there is an absolute, like, there can be a real relationship and a fake relationship, even if you want to draw arbitrary lines or different definitions therein, that like that such a thing is coherent to be described in reality.
Either the relation obtains or it does not. If it's true, it's real. If it doesn't obtain and you say that it is, that it's fake.
Perfect. So in your now I'll just ask you this, and this will kind of round it up. Like, in terms of relationship to God, is there any such thing as a fake relationship to God?
Yes.
There is.
Yes.
And would that relationship, that fake relationship, be unsalvific, non-salvific? It wouldn't save you.
Correct. Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. And can you in any way kind of delineate in any kind of way what those two things look like in your mind? Like, what does the real relationship look like? What does the fake relationship look like to you?
Yeah, so there's the ontological question, the epistemological question. The ontological question is, this is just a straight fact, does the relation with the actual God obtain in reality? And I could do some more reference work, and I won't on that. I have a lot I can say on that. But on the assumption it obtains, the relation is real. On the assumption the relation does not obtain, here's the next question, which is, how do I know if the relation is real? Because I could actually think that I have a real relation and I could just be wrong about that, or I could know that I don't have a real relation and I could be performing that. So how do you know if the relation is real? I could be deluded. I could just be in good faith, pardon the pun, mistaken. And so that's going to go down to your general criteria for knowledge as a whole. I don't like justified true belief, but it works for our purposes. So is my belief that I have a real relation justified? The claim is it's true. And so what's the basis for the justification? Now you get the standard justification tests. So it's an epistemological question.
Fair. What do you like better than justified true belief? I'm just curious.
I'll gesture at an answer. I'm an Aristotelian on this. I think that knowledge is primitive and can't be and can't be actually defined. I think it's a true primitive, but
a brute fact, or
no, not brute fact, primitive. So if I were to ask you to define red, you would just have to point. It's that color over there. I mean, it's
right. There's no descriptive of it. Right. Okay.
That being said, I will acknowledging that the definition I give you is not a true definition. It's an ostensive pointing towards. For me, knowledge is at the highest, the most I can say about it ontologically. It is the union of the soul, the intellect, if you will, the union of the soul via the intellect with the form of the object it is perceiving.
Okay. Well, I'm not gonna press you any further. This was a very interesting conversation, Chris. If an opportunity happened, I'd love to have a one-on-one, and I'd really like to discuss, even debate the contents of faith. I would take a conditionalist position. In fact, I'll even give you a precept to let you know where I would come from. I would come from a very purist, presuppositionalist position of the idea that conditionalism is true, that is the intent of Scripture, that warnings are absolutely real, salvation absolutely can be lost and forfeited. I would take that very kind of absolute purist position. I would define faith and belief as more than just affirmation of any propositions, but a direct fidelity and commitment to the object. Hence, I love how you talked about the object, because in the instances where the proposition is absent from the reference of belief, then you must be referring to the object. And I think we'd actually have some common ground there.
I think we would. And by the way, as much as I certainly would not agree with you on the commit thing, but I want to say the reason that some of my own free grace friends don't like my notion of faith is they're afraid of your argument. And I don't think being afraid of your argument, I don't think being afraid of your argument is a good reason to reject an object-oriented view of faith.
Right. I'll tell you what, worst case scenario, I know Charles would host and moderate that debate or discussion. So, we always got you anytime. I'm open to it anytime you want. Feel free to reach out. My channel is the Cone Club Cult, all K's. Don't ask. It's a long story of lore. But anyway, I really appreciate the time.
People on the whole internet who are interested in a philosophy of faith and lost in salvation. Listen, I'm happy to have it.
Well, no, that's good. I don't come across. Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you something. I've spent about probably 2 months now on the Christian King channel, kind of an open debate platform. People go in and share. I find most of the arguments and statements being made about 50 layers shallower than I've delved. So when I even hear people talking, to even jump in, I feel a insurmountable task to bring in a mountain of reference material, theological and historical and philosophical study. And I appreciate someone like you where we could have this type of conversation. So I hope for the opportunity. I thank you for your time. I know you're tired. Thank you, really. You've been really generous, Chris. I appreciate you for that. I've seen you stick longer on those panels and come to Donnie's thing. I know you got a busy life and a lot going on. You come over here to Charles's stream. It really means a lot to me. You're a very generous man, and I really appreciate you. And thank you for this engagement. It really was nice. Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Well, couple more minutes, or I think you want to go. I do need to go to bed.
No, I'm good. I'm going to yield. Thank you, guys. Charles, thanks for inviting me, man. I really appreciate it. No problem. You guys have a good night.
I just care about truth, and that's.
I know, Charles. I believe that, man. And you know what? We're going to find something here between us, I think, really at some point. So, yeah, no, Charles, I've always said you're the most consistent free grace. And by the way, Chris, I don't know if you know this, but like when I did that whole stream of like leaving Christianity because I'm sick of all the garbage and I can't even stand being identified with all of it anymore, Charles is the only one of all the free gracers I knew that came forward and said, you know what, free grace is true. Smokey affirmed the faith. He's more likely saved than not. He was the only one that stayed consistent. So I've always given Charles credit for that. He truly does practice and lives what he believes. So he's a real one.
Great job, man.
Spot on. All right, guys. Thank you so much. You guys have a great night. I'll chat with you later. Thank you, Chris, for all your time, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Blessings.
God bless. Howdy, you got anything else left before Chris goes to sleep?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, but it'd be like opening a can of worms. Language stuff is interesting.
Well, I'm glad I got Super Layman to run this transcript through and study out everything that y'all talking about.
It's going to say, I don't know what they were talking about. They're clearly stupid. Just ignore them both. That's what it's going to say.
I doubt it. But yeah.
Howdy can call me on my BS and say everything he said was just made up nonsense, right? Right, Howdy?
And see, that's the intriguing thing about philosophy is I'm not making those arguments. And I know that that's something I'm missing. but at the same time, I know philosophy's so debated, and there's different angles to it that I just feel like that I just can't go there right now. That don't mean I can't learn about it and be aware about it, but I just, it's just not where I'm at right now.
Yeah, it's really deep.
For sure.
I mean, the linguistics, I know about, Wittgenstein. I know about Safer-Whorf. I know about, those things like that. I know a lot about the linguistic side of things.
I will say this, and I think Howdy will appreciate this. The way that I approach linguistics, I was originally going to just go right into it, start studying it, and better or worse, Richard G. Howe got a hold of me and said, "You're not allowed to study linguistics yet." He was a mentor. I said, "Okay, tell me what to do." He goes, "You don't know what you're doing. Don't." He said, "This is a huge problem in philosophy. People go into linguistics. They should not do that." He goes, so this is the thing he gave me, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and I still believe it's true. The fundamental layer of reality is reality. That is what is. Above reality, you build on this metaphysics. Metaphysics asks the question, what is that which is? What is reality? From there, you have epistemology, which asks the question, what do we know? How do we know what is reality? Upon epistemology, you then get linguistics. How do I communicate what I know about what reality actually is? And then the final layer on top of that is hermeneutics. How do I understand what is communicated, what I know about what reality is? So that's a high level conversation. So if I'm going to talk philosophy of language, what's going to happen is if anybody disagrees with the metaphysics I hold, they're immediately going to say, or the epistemology. Now, wait just a minute, because metaphysics and epistemology are very contentious. And the views I hold are very classical, but they are very much out of step with the modern world. So I'm an Aristotelian, for instance. And then worse, in my particular area of metaphysics, I follow Duns Scotus more than Aquinas, and I'm a radical voluntarist. So I am very much, just because I know the material, I promise you, I am outside the mainstream in my views on philosophy, which doesn't make me right. It means that it's contentious.
Well, here's one issue. I currently believe that language is not the portrayal reality, that it's not a reality itself. So if that be the case, then all the arguments where people try to say, well, this tense form, this action start form, this verbal aspect form, it can't be describing reality. Now, but it's there for a reason. And so it's like, well, even if we're dealing with narrative is not reality. The event, the sayings, everything that happened, it hasn't been encoded in there. Instead, we have a narrative world that we look at, yet it's still able to convey meaning implicitly and through different rhetorical devices and all of that. So I think the question that needs to be asked is, what is the rhetorical function of verbal aspect, of action start, of these factors like that? Yeah. And that's when speech act theory comes in. But and I'm working through Van Hooser's mirror hermeneutics right now. But and it's going against some of my views, but I still want to learn it, because it's right in some areas, and he's a great man in hermeneutics and everything. But basically what it comes down to is the problem with speech act theory is you have what the text says, what it's doing with what it says, and what the effect it's supposed to have. The danger is that if we try to say that the application or result is the meaning of the text. Now, if we can do like what Curvella does and say, okay, you got text, thrust, and theology, then we might be able to preserve that. But speech act theory has been used against dispensationalism. Dr. Mike Stollard told me this, I've asked him about whenever I took his theological method class about what he said about speech act theory, and then I asked him like a year or so later, in a Zoom thing, and he basically said the languages are not on our side, and the reality is that the languages fields are all liberal, pretty much, and even the people that we respect, they go to liberal schools.
And that's again because linguistics is anti-realist.
Okay.
In my opinion.
I mean, those are factors I haven't even got to really touch on in the midst of these debates when we're still talking about the participle, and it's like, well, there's so much more I want to do, and take things, and I feel like we can't get off the ground zero because this argument has been perpetuated at a popular level, and it's taken forever to correct,
I want to ask Howdy. I'm just going to drop some names. He may know them, he may not. I wonder if you know these names. This is just a curiosity, okay? If I were to tell you that my philosophical worldview was a mixture of Aristotle, Duns Scotus, Edmund Husserl, Roy Bhaskar for the critical realism, and then just a sprinkling on top for a flavor of Soren Kierkegaard. How allergic would you be to me?
Aristotle's great. Kierkegaard, I'm surprised. I feel like most Christians would dislike Kierkegaard quite a lot. I think he makes some of the best arguments for Christianity, but his arguments, I think, are way too radical for the majority, if not almost all. One thing I want to say is I think Soren is the only man who could have, how the Bible says a man of great faith, like Abraham, he brought Isaac. I think there's not very many people who will climb that mountain, but Soren, I think, might have it in him. He's all in. What do you say? He's just all in, totally.
Well, he was. So I don't like existentialism, but he was the existentialist done right. And you can tell me, and feel free to tell me that I have unfairly represented somebody who cannot be fairly represented, because he's so. I don't know the word for him. It's beautiful, but he's as much of a psychologist as he is a philosopher. Well,
one reason I laughed is Soren is one of the few who. So I take Christianity as a braid of Athens and Jerusalem. I think a lot of it. I know I have a very different view of like canon than most people, but I think people like Philo and I think so. In my opinion, as of whatever today is, I don't think you can understand much of what's the New Testament authors are saying without reading Philo. I don't think you can understand much of what Philo's saying without reading Plato. So I think some Athenian tradition is essential to Christianity. Now I know a lot of people are like don't like that, but that's where I stand.
It's the first century world.
Speaking of people who don't stand where I stand on this, is first and foremost Soren. His quote. I mean, there's so many quotes. One of his is, "I'm going to bring Christianity to the Christians," because they think faith and reason go hand in hand, but I think faith is this primordial, totally beyond the intellect, and that.
Yes, that's me. I'm complete. I think if I'm gonna smash Soren into Aristotle, I think that so Aristotle gives us two basic powers of the soul, very, very basic. He gives us more, but the most fundamentally intellect and will, right? And he is going to consistently put, and all the Aristotelian tradition tends to put faith as a habit of intellect of some sort. I actually think that faith is a primitive alongside of the intellect and distinguished from it, and alongside of the will and distinct from it. I actually think it's fundamental. And I think of the three powers, that faith is the most basic power. And I say that for entirely non-theological reasons.
Well, I don't track all of that, but my current view of faith is that it's the innate ability within the image of God. So wherever that goes, I mean, I don't need prevenient grace in such a model, and that's appealing to me. at different levels. Some free grace may not like that, but I don't see any reason for arguments for prevenient grace. And that's got me really, as I'm preparing to debate SIG, they assume that grace comes first and it's prevenient grace, and then you work with that prevenient grace by believing and repenting, and then baptism, the sacraments and all of that. Well, if there is no prevenient grace, then their argument doesn't get off the ground as it currently is, but I've been arguing about it's an innate ability within the image of God for a while. And I don't know how that maps philosophically, but I mean, if you're saying it's a primitive alongside these other things,
right,
then you would say that is within the image of God, wouldn't you? Or potential?
Well, some of that depends on your definition of it. But if you, where I would make the connection is, insofar as humans are the kind of things that are oriented by nature and constitution towards God, and this is the image of God piece, then the way that you order yourself towards God is not with Aquinas by the intellect, nor is it with Scotus by love. The way you orient yourself towards God is by faith. That is the means by which you orient yourself towards the thing that is the source of you.
Okay.
I have something to say about like maybe faith as like a faculty of the soul sort of area. So when I think of stuff like this, I usually think of and these again, like I go with like I see a lot of Plato and Philo in what these guys are trying to say, and I read to what they say about it. And one way of thinking about this is there's these like two, you call it like two realms or two worlds, although this has like spatial temporal connotations that are inappropriate. But there's what's called like the sensible, and then what's called the intelligible. And the intelligible is what's grasped by what's called the nous, and that that's how you like apprehend things that that are unchanging, and that's with the mind. And then the body senses thing as like sensibles, like sight, hearing, taste, touch, all this. And the information you get from the body is like of things that are changing, what's called things that are coming to be but never are, whereas the mind hits the things that are but never become. So like the number two is the same as it was yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Like it's things like that. And so how Plato throws this is like the divided line and the cave allegory, where faith is like about the sensible things. So like, okay, well, I have to like trust my senses, but I don't really need allegedly, I don't really need this sort of thing to realize that 2 + 2 = 4. There's nothing I need to trust. So I also want to say something about the language thing.
Good.
To pique your interests, I guess, and sort of modern philosophy of language is first and foremost this guy named Bertrand Russell. I would say Gottlob Frege on Sense and Referent, but that's a bit difficult. But Bertrand Russell,
I've read on Sense and Reference. It's very difficult, but it's a good text.
So Bertrand Russell has this. Yeah, it's he's like the father of modern analytic philosophy.
Yeah.
But Bertrand Russell destroyed Frege with this beautiful paper called On Denoting.
Yeah. I've only read the first few pages of it. That is a hard paper, man. That dude, man, hard to read.
Yeah, you don't have to do direct. I would say like what you can do is like look at YouTube videos that talk about this sort of thing. So to interest someone in philosophy of language are these what Russell calls like the puzzles. Like philosophy he views as like this. You have these puzzles, and then you think about them, and they're sort of fun to interact with. And do you have a solution to them, or like what do you think about them? So there's 5 main
French
ones.
king with the bald French king.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, it is. The present king of France is bald. Is that true or false?
Right.
And why?
Right.
Now it sounds easy, but once you
Yeah.
think about it, it doesn't work so cleanly. Or
Right.
stuff like this sentence is false. So there's some there's like these linguistic puzzles, and there's a few more that
Yep.
sort of prompt you to think about, okay, well, what is language doing? What's its function? What do we want to say about these cases?
Right.
So that's one way of entering this world of stuff. I want to say the two I think of the two key players in the philosophy of language as it stands today are Quine, where he has this paper on the 2 dogmas of empiricism, which is a difficult
So let me just say about that paper, or the section that I finally got around to reading after watching a YouTube video about it, is finally what convinced me that Kant's distinction. I'm completely convinced that the a priori a posteriori is useful to talk about, but Quine convinced me that it's artificial.
Yeah, Quine has a lot of positions that are very interesting. He thinks sentences are meaningless. He thinks meaning is in the language because he's a verificationist. But I don't want to talk about all this. I want to say that he has an easier paper that I think everyone can read, which is called "On What There Is."
Okay, I've not read that one.
It's about a 6-page paper. Everyone can read it, even if you're not a philosopher. And he talks about. So getting back to the original problem of language goes back to Plato. The problem is, how can anyone say anything that's false? Just because for it to be false, it has to not be. And for you to, like, how do you say something that isn't? You'd have to say nothing. Now, that's a preamble. You have to dig into that quite a bit, but that's another problem that Quine solves allegedly in this paper. That's I think is relevant. The other most important figure in the philosophy of language, in my opinion, as it stands today, is this other guy called Saul Kripke.
Oh yeah. So do you think? Don't you think? I'm going to push back, but I don't mean it. Don't you think that Evans' work has kind of? I know Kripke's still the more cited, but isn't it really the case that, like the Madagascar thing, I understand, but isn't it the case that that Evans's work on Dossier has incorporated the best of Kripke without having the causal history problems that Kripke himself has?
Well, you don't have to. I'm not saying Kripke's right about anything that he's saying.
Oh, okay. You're just talking about the one. Okay, never mind then.
I'm saying
what I said. Go ahead. I follow you then.
Yeah, I'm saying to understand philosophy of language, you have
I agree.
Assuming I hate everything he says. You still have to read the guy because he's
I agree. I completely agree with you. Yep, that makes sense.
Yes. I think a lot of what he says is apt. For example, of one of the things. So I can illustrate things like, so for Quine, he thinks sentences are meaningless and this is like repugnant. So Kripke says some crazy stuff to me too, if I'm appraising them, is he says that identity is a matter of convention. So like when we're talking about trans world identity, because Quine or Kripke is solving a problem with logic, which is that modus ponens is like totally useless, and so we need this new logic called modal logic, where it's like no, A really like implies exclamation mark B, and then Quine gave like 5 like devastating arguments to this project. The main of which is that modal logic is intentional rather than extensional. And so like the truth conditions of sentences is dependent upon what's going on in the person's head. And you don't have like what's called intersubstitutivity, salva veritate, where if you take 2 things which are identical and then you can't substitute them, like let's say, what is it?
Yeah, because they're embedded in the subjective webs. Yep. Okay, I got you.
Okay, so
that's cool.
A few problems. So Kripke comes out with the semantics of modal logic that is extensional, where we have all these possible worlds, and what Bob Dylan picks out. The name Bob Dylan doesn't like pick out a thing in this world. It picks out a collection of things across all these possible worlds, and there's rules about that. So the main reason why conventional and the problem is, okay, when you're doing these world transformations, you keep some things fixed and others. So for example, modal language is like could, like I could have worn a blue shirt today. What does that mean? Well, allegedly it means in like there's this possible world and in this world I have a blue shirt, and then okay, here's a tougher question. Could I have been born 1,000 years ago? Like, is that possible?
What does I mean? Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I could have worn a blue shirt. Could I have been Asian?
Yeah.
Is that possible? Is that a possible world? Is there a possible world in which I'm a fish? Could I have been, and then that's a difficult question. And he says, well, it's just a matter of convention. Like, what do we mean by identity? And it's like, well, what I am being a matter of convention is like wildly implausible, because that commits me to saying things like, well, I have a really, really strong interest in getting people to change their linguistic behavior so that I become immortal, because they talk talk as if yeah. Anyways, that's a long digression. But yeah, the language stuff is fun. There's 5 distinctions that off the top of my head that I want to highlight for the audience or for posterity or for people to pique people's interest, is like the use versus mention distinction of sentences. So I can use a sentence. This is like a quotational or disquotational language. Then there's the intentional versus extensional. So here's a thing. All renates are chordates, and renates are things with hearts. Chordates are things with chordates are things with hearts. Renates are things with livers. Now, as it so happens,
one second, Howdy. Larry Sanger on Twitter, he's been going back and forth about Michael Heiser, about gods and all that stuff, the arguments about that, and he's making the argument that when the Bible talks about gods, it's quotational. He's using that language. So I just wanted to mention that. I caught one of those words, but go ahead.
Yeah. So sometimes you'll say something, but just because you say something doesn't mean you assent to what's being said. This is another person in the philosophy of language of ethics called R.M. Hare, who's also crucial to modern philosophy, as he says it's something like, sometimes you can show a child how to write a check. Like you can say, oh, you sign your name here, you write these numbers here, and then you actually write them out, and then, okay, this is how you sign a check. But that's how to mention a sentence. But to use it is to sign your name, and then, okay, this is I really assent to this.
Yeah.
The other obvious examples is okay, well, Robert Zimmerman is Bob Dylan, but Robert Zimmerman has X letters in his name and Bob Dylan has X letters in his name. It's okay, well, you're not doing de re, you're doing what's called de dicto when you're talking about the words that are used to point. That's another distinction I want to talk about, is de dicto, de re. I think I could talk more about that, but that should be sufficient for now. The other is I hesitate this based on what you said.
I'm gonna feed my cat. I'll be back.
There's the analytic versus synthetic distinction. So analytic is just okay, well, things that are true, because really a lot of what these language problems are is okay, well, what's true? Why is it true? Do we want to say, so here another one is vacuous truths, do we want to say that all of the elephants in my room are blue and all the elephants in my room are not blue? Do we want to say that's how do we want to use language or whatever? And then modally you could think of counterfactuals and counterpossibles. If this had happened, that would have happened. You can think of counterpossibles, which is where you have impossible antecedents. So if 2 + 2 = 5, then what follows? It's or sometimes let's say you can't trisect an angle or whatever, that's a mathematical truth, and it says, how would people have reacted if someone discovered that the trisection of an angle, even though that's impossible, you'd say something well, people would have been amazed or something. But there's different opinions on it. I mean, all of what I've said, there's arguments. The other, I forgot, getting back to intentional and extensional.
Extensional. Mm-hmm.
So all chordates are redates. All creatures with hearts are creatures with kidneys. Now that's true of the actual world, but you could imagine worlds where this doesn't hold. There could have been, something with a heart. The thing is, this is why we need like modal logic, is in the actual world, all chordates are renates, so they have the same extension. Now, if you have an extensional theory of meaning, another problem in the philosophy of language is where do we put the meaning? Is it in the speaker? Huh? What'd you say?
I'm back.
I can't. I'm back. Yeah.
Everything went away for a second, and now it's back to normal again. Everything.
What did you say? You said you
were saying. I apologize.
So the chordates renates, not true. The actual world.
Yeah, that's the last thing I heard you say was chordates renates.
Okay. Now those have the same extension in the actual world. Now, a big deal of the philosophy of language is meaning. So some sentences are meaningful, some sentences are meaningless. Now, the project of the philosophy of language is how do we draw the line between meaningfulness and meaninglessness? It's a very difficult project. Mm-hmm. One of them, and another question is, okay, where is the meaning? Is the meaning in the sentence? Like, is the sentence meaningful? Is the proposition that the sentence expresses meaningful? Is it the speaker who's talking? Is it use? Maybe meaning is in use. Maybe meaning is in, all these pieces of meaning. And so here's a problem with the extensional theory: is all chordates are renate. So chordates and renates have the same extension because everything with a heart has a kidney. You don't want to say like chordate means renate. Like those mean different things.
And yet it always points to the same object if you try. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This goes back to another distinction: sense versus reference. So there's like different ways of looking at the same object. Like I can say that white thing over there, and being a white thing is different than being a hard thing. But I can say, okay, well, it's the wall. That's another thing to talk about. But so how we solve this extensional problem of the meaningfulness of extensional words having the same target when prima facie they mean different things, as you say, well, really what the extension is, you take the set of all the possible worlds, and then you take the set of the worlds that map to the extension. And what chordate means is this map from all possible worlds to all things with hearts in those worlds. And it's so you preserve your extensional meaning. Yeah, but I'm rambling, but there's definitely a lot in language of philosophy.
The last thing I'll say, and then I'll let Charles, I'll let as if it's my show. Charles said what he runs, but if you go through that list, 5, 6, 7 things you just gave, and you mentioned the arguments, and you're right. The way, if you cannot talk with those arguments very long without running headfirst into both metaphysics and epistemology, and my own assessment is that I think the part of, not all, I don't want to overstate, but a meaningful part of the disagreement around these issues is because linguists as a whole have refused to do serious metaphysics, or they haven't taken seriously the metaphysical assumptions built deeply into their system. I mean, possible world semantics, there's already questions we're just bracketing about realism. That's Plato already. Abstract objects, as opposed to Aristotle, who says there's no abstract objects. And then, so that's just the two basic views. I mean, there's obviously views that are totally non-realist as a whole. So I am inclined to say that all those distinctions are important and need to be discussed. And I've read most of them. Some are new to me, but I've read most of them and read the relevant papers, some of the relevant papers. But I think that it's just important that we get a sense of what we mean by reality. And of course, now the circular problem is that's going to presume what you think language means when you're talking about reality. And I recognize that, but I still think what's more fundamental is reality itself. So I think that when we're talking about those distinctions, we need to make sure we leave space to say, wait a minute, but what is a possible world, without just trying to give a stipulation.
Yeah. There's a lot I want to say. That's a huge question, like the metaphysical question, because the semantic question is, how do we interpret what it means to say it's possible that P, or I could have Phi'd? You say, oh, well, we can explicate the meaning of these terms and these semantics of possible worlds and extensions. It's like, okay, well, what is a possible world? Are they like actual? Are they concrete? Are they abstract? Are they pictorial? Are they? That reminds me. When you're talking about the problem of modern philosophy. So like the positivists are a big deal. Like who have sort of like, I would
Right.
say like swept metaphysics under the rug as allegedly meaningless.
Right.
And that's how they
Got
demarcated it.
the rug. Yeah.
Yeah, they said, oh, okay, all these metaphysical questions are literally meaningless because to be meaningful is to be verifiable, and these things aren't verifiable, and so.
Which means right.
So
Yeah,
how do you say Comte's name? You say Comte or you say it differently in French?
You saying Auguste Comte? Yeah, I say
Yeah.
Comte.
Yeah. Okay, Comte. Okay. Want to make
What's
sure.
that? Oh, yeah, he's the father of positivism.
Yeah. Supposedly called the father of sociology too.
Yeah, he invented a lot of phenomenological language that we use today. He was also insane. He was like a rat. I mean, it's hard. I don't want to say because he is a genius, but he was like kind of like a rabid atheist. He thought we should literally worship like the Pythagorean theorem and set up, humanist churches. Like he was when I say humanist, I mean like, I would say treating man as divine. It's okay. We worship mathematical truths, and then we need to replace all the names of the months with names of scientists. Like we need Darwin's or whatever, and then
that's the way we learned it. It went from theological to metaphysical to positivistic, and that assumes modernity at that point, and then now we're in a postmodern world. So
yeah, he also like died in a sanitarium. Like he was like literally insane. Also, so did Nietzsche. But I don't want to drag these guys through the mud too much. What I do want to say is like, okay, where did all the metaphysics go? Well, the metaphysics left with, I was going to say with the logical positivists at the Austrian school, but actually, Lehman jogged my memory. Really, maybe it goes back to Comte.
I was going to say Kant. That was going to be my thing. Kant.
No. Well, he had like the.
Oh, you said Kant. Yeah, Comte.
Yeah.
I would think that Kant, because I think that he makes metaphysics almost impossible. But
well, he had the prolegomena and that stuff and the yeah.
I realize that's a freshman philosophy answer, but I just think it's basically right. So.
Yeah.
All I know about is Kant is a categorical imperative.
Oh yeah.
I got that from ethics.
Groundwork for the metaphysics of ethics or morals. That's a good paper. Okay. Where did metaphysics go? Well, Comte. Well, maybe even like Comte and Francis Bacon, where I don't know. Sometimes I want to say like Occam, like nominalism and stuff. But so yeah. But really, I think where it's like where metaphysics leaves is the Austrian school of logical positivism. So really we're coming off of Frege and Russell, and we're talking about like logic and language. This is at the school was like Wittgenstein and all the big names that are evaporating from my mind right now. But the other guy, Carnap, Rudolf Carnap, and some of the other guys. AJ Ayer is a big
I was waiting for him. Yep.
And some others who I'm forgetting. So they think philosophy is doing bad because science is doing so good, and philosophy is like doesn't have a role to play in society anymore. Because you read like, okay, Schopenhauer, the world is will and representation, and then that's what the philosophers are doing. Or you're like Hegel, and you're talking about the absolute, and then those are the philosophers, and then you have the scientists who are like making all of these. Like this is like this is coming off of quantum mechanics and relativity, and like science is burgeoning, and philosophy seems useless. Like there's no place for philosophy, and so they wanted to transform philosophy into a different project, where instead of asking like, is there a God, is like, are there compositions, like are we does two objects compose a further object, or like all the speculative metaphysical questions.
What is the nature of change? Yeah.
And so they said, okay, this is all a waste of time. Really, what we can do is we can talk about logic and we can talk about language. What we can do, the project of philosophy, is to clarify concepts, conceptual engineering, and working on logic, and maybe some phenomenology, but we'll just go give that to this psychiatrist, and we'll hand reality to the scientist, and we'll talk about language and logic as a how it's used in language, and that's what we're doing. So that's where metaphysics disappeared, where I think it sort of had a resurgence recently, but it started with Quine and others who argued totally decisively that verificationism is totally ridiculous. For a sentence to be meaningful means that there's some a verification that actually Quine was a verificationist. I forgot who made the arguments, but the verification criteria is okay for something to be meaningful. Something we have to have some observable that changes or something. And I don't feel like going. One of the results of that is there's no statement that's shown in isolation, like the cat is on the mat. You can't just hold that proposition up in like a vacuum. That's like there's all these auxiliary hypotheses. So if you're a verificationist, individual sentences like the cat is on the mat is literally meaningless because it doesn't have a verification criteria, because the verification criteria is like dependent upon like your whole like web of beliefs or whatever. But the last guy I want to mention, and then I'll end, is Wittgenstein, the last language guy that I forgot, who's also like the most important that slipped my mind. Charles had mentioned, okay, what is the language? And I think he alluded to something what he would say is like, well, language, we have like a pictorial theory of language. The function of language, qua Wittgenstein, early Wittgenstein, is that
I was gonna say I get early and late Wittgenstein mixed up. Which one believed which?
The first one was the tight hard ass, and then the latter one was more open. So this is the hard ass. I shouldn't be cursing, but I can't think of a word. Is he says, well, language functions as pictorial, and what's happening is we're translating in the original sense of translation, which is like a movement. So I'm translating this picture in my mind into your mind, and you get the same pictures. When I say a cat is on the mat, you can form in your mind the impression of a cat being on a mat or something like this. So you can think of it, what it is language is on his theory is what's called representational.
Right.
So what about ideational? Is that, you ever heard it that way?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. It's what's called representational, and so here's one way to think of it: is what would the perfect language? This is how Wittgenstein's project goes. Is like, what would be the perfect language? What would be the perfect logic? What features would it have? I'm not saying I have that, but what are the qualities of this thing? Like, what must it have to count as this? And if language is representational, the perfect language just like is the world. So if I say the cat is on the mat, these are just like sounds that are coming into your ear. If I had a perfect language, what would happen is like a cat on a mat would like appear in front of you or something like that. But we don't have that, so we settle for what's like outlines, or what's like he calls like wireframes. Like we put these wireframes around the world and objects, and then we hand them to each other. There's I mean, I'd love to talk like so much about all these different things, but it's difficult.
Well, Chris, thank you for coming and going deep with these guys, because I'm going to learn from it, and Smokey needs people like y'all. If Smokey's going to be restored to the faith, however way that looks, he needs people that are dealing with his tough questions, and so I do pray for him, and so and guys, I learn from y'all, and it's a blessing, that y'all hear it. What's very interesting, I'm in SIG's Discord, and a guy was like, "I'll debate you on philosophy." I said, "Well, I don't think I'm the one, but I said I can learn from you, And so I'm gonna send him this video and see what he thinks, because you encounter people all the time about philosophy, and it's just a third person I can get input on, on the stream, and you never know, that person may join us at some point. I don't care if you're Orthodox or whatever, I want the truth, and if you're going to deal with it at this type of level, then we gotta engage it,
I really do think if you want to get into, this is an older work, but it's still recommended as a classic. It's large, so it's something that you should, and it's very large, something you get multiple volumes of and read it when you're at the relevant times when you're interested. But Copleston's History of Philosophy, the man's such a lucid writer, and he's a good philosopher, and he was a great, him and Etienne Gilson, especially Etienne Gilson's book, The Unity of Philosophical Experience. If you read that and then pick your favorite philosopher, I just went straight with it. I just started in volume 1. I didn't finish them all, but I read a lot of the early volumes. Then I went ahead and read about Aquinas, and then I went back and read Augustine. Then I went forward and read the last one where Comte is discussed and things like that. I read about Comte because I was interested in sociology, because I was interested in grounded theory research, and so that was my way into that. But yeah, I think that and maybe Howdy has a different view, but I think that studying rather than just reading philosophical papers, which can feel super dry, if you can get a good, solid historical, this is what these people did in response to what they were saying, and this was what was going on in the world at the time and why they were making the arguments, to me, that was more clarifying than reading individual papers. So says I. That was helped me.
Okay. Yeah, I've been wanting to ask you, where did you arrive at far as paradigm wise, in sociology, in the social sciences, where did you end up in those particular areas?
Yeah. So yeah, for me, my preferred methodology is I make heavy use of grounded theory and phenomenology, and I am a phenomenologist is my overall preference. And then this is not quite sociology, but I hold to critical realism. So that's Bhaskar, and that comes out of some of the positivist work later on and post-positivist work. But so critical realism holds to a constructivist epistemology. So it's fallibilism, all knowledge is constructed, but the reality upon which it's built is ontologically real. So whereas Aristotle, who I like quite a bit, at least is commonly interpreted as having a realist epistemology, you have direct access with your mind to reality. What Bhaskar and them says is, well, everything is filtered through your senses, and so your mind creates models of reality, but it creates those models and you get feedback of your models, and depending on how effective you are at constructing models, you actually interact with real things, but you always interact with those real things through the models that you create. And those are socially constructed models, but the reality itself is real. So that informs the sociological approach I take, methodologically being grounded theory. So think Glaser, think Charmaz, and then and then phenomenology, especially as you get from Husserl.
Well, do me a favor real quick. My undergrads in sociology and psychology, take me to the masters, where you're at first, a level above that. I need a bridge, in other words.
Yeah, I think what I would do if I was wanting, so since you already have a sociology background, that's an excellent place to start your philosophical studies, because everything is, you pick a place and you just take a bridge. And really what I would do, since you already know, since sociology starts with Comte, I really would start with Copleston's volume on Comte. I think it's volume 20, and just read that. And this will tell you what was going on in the world philosophically. And all of a sudden you're going to have questions. If you follow the arguments, what was going on? And then you say, wait a minute. And then you can decide from there which which things you want to start tracing back and tracing down. Because the question that I think you want to ask yourself as a sociologist, and therefore as a linguist, and this is what Howdy was just talking about especially, is all of these theories of language and theories of sociology. So this is my view of sociology. If you say that sociology is referring to real structures, now maybe it's not real, so symbolic interaction says it's not, but let's say they're real structures of some sort. What are these patterns of behavior? Where are they coming from? Where are they? And so, like, what kind of things are they? Well, are they just tendencies? Okay, but what explains the regularities of the tendencies? And how do you account for the fact that it's all these different kind of people who have different individual free wills, if that's free will, acting the same way? So that's going to get you into what is human nature. So that's what I was saying, that these questions of what is sociology are going to raise questions. What is the nature of the soul?
Right.
And so for me, man is a political animal, which is Aristotle's thing. So I would get a good solid background of Comte, only because you can understand the history of the 19th, early 20th century philosophy, what was going on then. And then you can step back and go, okay, what do I want to do from here? And then I would go back and look at Plato and Aristotle. I think understanding Plato and Aristotle helps you see how to assess the questions moderns are asking and not asking.
Yeah, well, I've read The Republic, but I mean, that doesn't mean I understood it, you know?
Yeah, and that's why I say I don't know that it's like, I can tell you, go read Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle. I've read it.
I've read it, yeah.
The problem is, if you're just reading papers, it's like go read a sermon. Go listen to a sermon.
Right.
The nice thing about a historical analysis is you get to understand what was going on, what kind of questions were they asking, why were they asking these kinds of questions, what was the nature of the debate that was going on, and it helps you. That's why when you know the story, then you can pick up the Republic. You go, oh, now I understand.
Yeah. And you know, I did have some exposure with Western civilization, church history, other things like that. And a lot of times they would start before that. And I would have conversations, and this was around 2005. After reading that,
tell Melody in the comments, that's why you buy one volume when you're interested in.
Yeah. So around 2005, you know, I was interacting about some of these concepts of philosophical stuff, and I would read my Bible, and it was right around the time I started getting into like Greek keyword studies, and I'm seeing morphe, and there's different words that are used in the Greek New Testament. Yep. And I'm like, I understand those philosophical concepts, and that's how I was interpreting things. But then I started, I got more in towards the Jewish, you know, understanding of things. But how to what Howdy's saying, I haven't fully evaluated Philo. You know, I've dismissed Philo because I disagree with his hermeneutics. And what would be interesting to see is Howdy is, for all practical purposes, a dispensationalist. So it makes me wonder. I mean, he's a dispensationalist before he's free grace. You know, I mean, his soteriology, I think, will eventually click when he fully has the implications of dispensationalism. But what it makes me wonder is it because of certain philosophical forks that he's taken that dispensationalism is taken, and that he's saying, okay, this is where it lines up. So it makes me wonder if I can work my way backwards. You know, dispensationalism is the theology. Here's the hermeneutic. What is the, you know, the philosophy and all of that stuff behind it, you know, and see if I can eliminate certain options that way. Now, I'm not assuming dispensationalism is true, but I can start there, you know, and work backwards.
I will just say in general that the cool thing is about philosophy, it's like theology. Once you start asking one question, start pulling the thread,
it goes everywhere.
It just it answers other questions. So you could even, another thing to do other than sociology, I recommend comps. The other thing to do is, because you know so much about language, you could actually start with the linguistics and theories of reference. And so there are tons of YouTube. Like one of my personal favorites is a guy named Kaplan. He has like a 10 series. It's very, very easy to follow. It's for undergrads, but it's a good place to start. Where he goes.
Is that the same Kaplan of the Kaplan Institute? Is that related to
I
that?
don't think so. No.
Okay.
He's
Because my chair was working with Kaplan. You know.
yeah. No, it's. Oh, is that his name? Kaplan.
She did a lot of work in deviant behavior and all of that stuff.
I'm pulling it up. Kaplan philosophy.
She's actually got access to all the Kaplan data.
Yep, Kaplan. So yeah, if you do, his name is Jeffrey Kaplan, and he has a whole playlist. He's a philosophy professor, and he's just entertaining.
Okay.
And so he has an entire playlist on let's see, I'm looking at philosophy of language, that full playlist. It's John Stuart Mill, and then compositionality of language, and then Gottlob Frege, and then John Searle on proper names, and then possible worlds, and then you get into Kripke, 2 parts on Kripke, so the causal theory of names. Then you get into Garrett Evans, which he thinks is the one true philosophy of names, and then Bertrand Russell. That's 9 videos, which is
which playlist is that? I found his channel. Which
the
one?
philosophy of language.
Okay, I see it. Yeah.
And you could start there, and that'll give you a good place to start thinking about.
Okay.
And then you can say, oh, okay, well, where they can, and then you can like pick the thinker that interests you and say, oh, okay, like Stuart Mill. I mean, okay, what was going on in his world? And dig back in further.
I know about ethics. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely disagree with all of them for metaphysical reasons, but if you can understand what's going on in the way that line thinks, it's surface level, but it gets you started and lets you start asking the right questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Can't believe I forgot J.S. Mill. A million names are important.
Yeah, I know.
He's the utilitarianism guy, right?
Yeah.
The
direct reference. Yeah, on his philosophy, his I think it's On Proper Names was the name of his paper, if I recall. So yeah, you like language, so start there and ask yourself, like, what does it mean? I'm holding this thing up. What does it mean when you say Chris is pointing at his phone? Well, what you just give yourself permission to say, well, that's the phone. But what does that mean? It's just the phone. But how are you referring to the phone?
Right.
And so how are you doing that? That's just a word. That's just a sound. Like what does that mean?
Right.
And so Mill is just going to say, and he talks about, he's going to focus on proper names. He's going to focus on Charles or Howdy rather than, or he could say, the black phone sitting on my chair, since it's I think he does descriptivist, a definite theory of names. But the point is you have a definite pointer. Okay, well, that's fine. That's a good start. But then it turns out that turns out not to work, because what does Zeus refer to?
Yeah, because he doesn't really exist.
If the reference just is the thing.
Okay.
And if Zeus doesn't exist, then what does the name Zeus refer to? It doesn't mean anything. But that seems silly, because of course Zeus means something. So how do you get away with that? So that's where, again, you have to start somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the modern theory.
Yeah, my assumption. Yeah, my assumption now is meaning is referential, and in other words, words are signs or symbols, and they point to something,
Yeah.
And so I mean that's where I'm starting.
Yeah. Yeah, and my own assumption is very close to that. My assumption is slightly different. My thinking is that meaning is intentional, not referential, which is a very, very subtle difference. But it's just the same thing you said with a little bit more technical language.
If I write something with a particular intent, but if I intend to refer to something, then. And see, this is significance, because if the meaning is in the text, but yet somebody says, "Oh, well, this is referring to the 70 AD, or this is referring to the tribulation," well, that doesn't mean that the meaning is the tribulation or 70 AD. You got to go at a higher level and say it's temporal judgment, and that allows for to be dual referent,
Yep.
possibly near, far, and all that type of stuff.
Right. And so then then for me, you ask interesting questions like, okay, so I intended to make this reference. Well, I think intentional acts are always relational. So Smokey would like that. I think they're always in relational acts, which means this is my language. There's a subjective note of the relation, which is rooted in me, and then the objective note of the relation, which is attempting to reach out to something because I'm a realist. I think there's a real thing. And if the relation obtains, then it's a true fact. That's where truth comes in. But it may not obtain at all. It may successfully form, but not obtain. So Russell's paradox of the present king of France is bald. Well, there is no, or we can call the Zeus, there is no present king of France. So I can intend to refer to it, but if there's nothing for it to obtain to, the reference is successful. And it's clearly successful because we're talking about it, but it's not true because it doesn't actually obtain in the real world. And so truth becomes empirical. It's actually not linguistic. And so then you can ask, well, what does this refer to? Which is slightly different from the question is what was he intending to refer to? Because you can refer erroneously. And this depends on exactly how the subjective node inside of your side of the relation. And then is the referent true? Did it obtain? Did it meet the rules of form of the successful referential intentional relation? And then did it obtain? Is it actually the case that this is the correspondence theory of truth? Is it really the case that this is black? So all those sorts of things are wrapped up. That's a super quick version. That's me. That's no one else has said it exactly like that. That's
Okay.
That's me. So you're allowed to say that's dumb.
Well, this video is going to make a whole lot of interesting shorts. I'll be interested to see what video shorts the AI makes. We made y'all in a whole nother kind of audience with this one.
And
I have some additions.
Go ahead.
So I'm thinking of, okay, maybe Charles, like what use is philosophy to Charles? Maybe philosophy of language if he's like an exegete. And then if so, like how? I actually am thankful that you brought up what's his name, John Stuart Mill, because here's the thing, like when you're reading the Bible, you're reading a language, and critical to your role as an interpreter or whatever is understanding what the author means. And now we have to say, well, what is meaning? So John Stuart Mill, he's not the only guy, but really it's where it kicks off is what's called, or really, well, meaningfulness is like an attribute of like sentences in a language. And then we can ask, well, what's a language? Or like, and what, like, okay, maybe we're interested in like language and stuff like this. One is like the puzzle stuff. Another is like, what are these features of language that are interesting? One of the most interesting features of language is what's called compositionality, where I can construct a totally novel sentence and then you nearly immediately understand what I'm saying, even though you've never been prompted with that sentence before. That's an incredible feature of language.
No one has ever spoken that sentence in the history of humanity ever, and yet you understand what it means.
Like I can say the 50-foot bat flew through the Golden Gate Bridge, and I can give some crazy story, and you immediately, well, by stipulation, I'll just assume like you understand what I'm saying. Now that's an incredible feature of language. It's what's called, now people think, okay, well maybe it's because like words are composite objects. Maybe you can understand this sentence because the individual words that compose it are somehow, you understand like what are like building blocks, and then because you have that and you know how by the structure of my sentence how to put them together, you can put the sentence together and understand it that way. Even what's funny is even that theory has problems. Like you can ask questions about that. But so how is that possible? What explains that fact? That's like what's called a desideratum of a theory. Is like That's like like what it's almost like inexplicable. Like what explains this sort of thing? The other is clearly some sentences are meaningful and clearly other sentences are not. I can say the cat is on the mat, and that is meaningful somehow. Or I can say blue ribbon after sky turtle fly, and that's not. This is the second big. The compositionality question is like the first biggest question about like what languages. The second is, okay, what distinguishes meaningful utterances from meaningless utterances? And then you have to give some, like, that's another desideratum, that's another fact that sort of cries out for explanation. And what's interesting about this is that there can be meaninglessness in what appears to be different ways. For example, I can say blah, 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 or, like random noise, and that's also meaningless. That's meaningless. That's meaningless is different than when I say, blue cat up dog. Like somehow there's something different about that, but that's also meaningless. So there's more things for us to consider and try to explain. But Charles, go ahead.
Colorless green idea, sleep furiously.
Oh yeah, colorless green idea, sleep furiously, Chomsky. But Charles has said, okay, well, maybe this does have some interest in my what my values or my goals or what I'm trying to accomplish. Maybe. But the other is I think is pertinent towards like debate is logic and what's called like reason. Like what are like these privileged kinds of like inferences where I can say free grace is false because the sky is blue. The sky is blue, therefore free grace is false. That's an argument. And how do you like engage with that argument? Like what are the moves that people like that are like what's objectionable about that? And what's objectionable about saying like free grace is false because free grace is false? What's objectionable about saying free grace is false because and so understanding arguments I think might interest you, and that's going to talk about inference and logic. But you had asked how do I ease myself into this, because a lot of this is pretty heavy. I think what Chris said was great. I would say what I think an easy way is if it depends like what your interests are. Like if it's specifically about language, then probably where most people start out is Bertrand Russell. That's where if you go to some Philosophy 101 course on language, you're probably going to start there. And you're going to start with the puzzles of language, which we had talked about earlier, and you can think about them. What are your solutions? What are other people's solutions? Because theories of language are theories insofar as they solve the problems of philosophy of language. Like that's what it means to do this activity. So there, I think, is a good place of entry. I would say like just YouTube videos, like these short YouTube videos on philosophy of language, philosophy of meaning, philosophy of reference, or theories of reference and stuff like that is a good way. The other is I'm probably the only person who thinks this is what would also inform my exegesis or understanding of the text of the New Testament authors or something like this. So surely you already, I think, have the understanding that to understand the New Testament, you have to understand the Old Testament. It's privileged. It's prior to and informs the New Testament authors, what they say, what they mean with their words. Let's assume a compositional theory of words is, or whatever your theory is. Surely that's going to be informed by what the Old Testament authors say, because they're using similar language, talking about similar things, talking in similar ways. So the points of comparison and similarity are like unavoidable. Like you could imagine debating someone on Hebrews, where Hebrews is like alluding to being laid low in the wilderness and all this stuff, and putting God to the test. And someone makes an argument and you say, well, what happened in Exodus? And he says, oh, I haven't read Exodus. Like you would almost like lose interest in the conversation at that point. Like that's just so inept.
Mhm.
So similarly, again,
And you know, my answer probably to almost every free grace question that's asked in a debate is Old Testament theology. Seriously, it's the Septuagint is the bridge, you know, and I'm not denying that there's not other stuff that developed during intertestamental times, but I feel like that the Septuagint helps so much, you know, to understand the Hebrew concepts in behind the New Testament.
Yeah, it informs a lot of the so like words, like people use words differently. Like I can say I hit him with a bat. Like maybe that probably means I hit him with like a wooden thing, but it could mean I hit him with this flying black bird looking thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like we've said, but I think that's not the only source material for the New Testament authors. I mean, just because someone uses a literary device or a phrase or an idiom or something outside of the Old Testament doesn't mean that what the person that the person who's being quoted or whatever is like a saint or like infallible. I wouldn't say like, okay, well, Philo got it right or Plato got it right. I'm not saying anything like that, but I would say something like New Testament authors, like specifically Johannine literature, is a lot of really important phrases, especially like Christological phrases that are used, like and in Paul, like in him all things were like through him, the only begotten Son. I forget. There's like all these significant, like really heady, like significant things, and there's like I think 20 plus quotations, like verbatim to Philo. And now I understand you disagree with Philo because he has this allegorical interpretive method, but there's something I want to say about this. This is late, and I do want to say this is Philo is a Jew in Rome. He's like an envoy, and what Philo sees is this Roman culture, which he thinks is like pretty bad because he is a Jew, and it's bad for like all the, like various reasons. Like you could think like ethical reasons and specifically theological reasons, because the Romans, who are impressively unimaginative in borrowing from Greek theology, have these myths that are totally ridiculous, like the air and the earth made babies and these giants, and there was this god who had kids and ate them, and then his son decapitated him, and these crazy stories. And Philo's thinking, how can this society be so successful when their stories about God are like totally ridiculous? Like how can you believe something like this and like function as like a society? And so what Philo did was he looked at exegetes of Homer and Hesiod. Another thing I don't think you can understand the New Testament without reading Homer and Hesiod, but that's another story, is what did people say, like what were the commentators saying about this? Because like it's totally ridiculous. And the solution of Roman exegetes and even Greek exegetes at that time was to interpret these stories allegorically, and so you can sort of save face on a lot of this stuff. And so the other influence is he's literally a Platonist. He's like off the deep end in the Timaeus and all the Platonic dialogues. And what he wants to do is, you could view this positively or negatively, but syncretize Rome and Jerusalem. And it's a question, okay, is he writing this stuff so that he can convince Jews that Greek philosophy is okay, or is he writing this to Greek philosophers to let them know that the Jewish religion is like philosophically defensible? And this conglomeration of his project is after you read what he's saying and what his goals are and what he says, his shadow does loom onto the, at least for me. Not, I mean, maybe not too much, but he does cast a shadow on it for me. The other thing is not just him, but also the literary.
One second, ETT, where did you go? He's basically a Mexican Hebrew Israelite. But
Oh yeah, I know. I seen that guy.
Yeah.
The other is literary devices, and so for one, just for example, Paul uses styles and structures of argumentation and discourse that mimics. Because here's what happens: people think like this sola scriptura stuff. They think like this happens in a vacuum, but he's talking to people, and these people don't. As soon as you say, a few sentences about the gospel, all of a sudden they're like spiritually enlightened and they can understand everything else. And they just a lot of
Right.
There's like a lot of this baggage that's with who he's writing to. Like, so suppose like you're writing to someone, and a lot of times what happens when you're writing, you try to meet people where they're at, and then so you can talk about for example, you can talk about like Tartarus and Hades and these things. Like, you don't have to transliterate every single theological word from Hebrew, because there's some conceptual overlap between the two cultures. But the thing is, when you do this conceptual overlap between the two cultures, what they think those words mean is going to inform like how you present things to them. So when I talk to like some random Roman and I say in the world unseen or whatever, they're not going to have in their head the Septuagint. Now, what he's saying is what the author is saying is a way to explain this to someone, but he's explaining it to them in the way that they understand. So when they're using words or literary devices or all these things, you have to put yourself in the mind of not only the person who's speaking, but the person he's speaking to. And I think so I make the strong claim, maybe I could debate this some days, that you can't understand the New Testament without reading the Odyssey and the Iliad. Mark very like and Acts is intentional. Like you,
in the book of Luke, whenever Jesus appears on the road to Emmaus, I felt like I was reading the Odyssey, because you have, gray eye Athena or whatever, that you would always have this idea that the gods or goddesses would take on a certain role and travel with a person and not reveal themselves, And I forgot the term. I had a teaching on it once that as about it. I found a paper on it later on to see if it confirmed it, but I was like, yeah, this felt like that,
Yeah. So, for example, what struck out to me, especially Mark, is his narrative is structurally an Odyssey, and it's also thematically. I mean, my interpretation is way out here, but so for example, Jesus is on a boat for like half the story of Mark, which is weird because he's on a boat in Judea and like, you know what I mean? It's like, why is he always on a boat? Why do the disciples have to be fishermen of all things? Like, oh, it's kind of cute that they're like, I'll teach you, like he has that cool phrase or whatever, but are they really just fishermen just so he can say, oh, so you can be? It seems like there's more to it than that. It seems like there's a lot of symbolism, when I read it, and maybe I'm overanalyzing, or maybe because I have all this baggage that I bring to the table. But when I read something, sometimes I'll say like, oh, this is like I'm drawing like parallels. I don't know if that makes sense, and maybe it's a bit difficult for me to explain.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, okay, we have a sea scene. You mentioned the boat. I mean, it happens in the book of Jonah also, but I could see where you're like, all right, this is this is Poseidon type imagery. I mean, I understand that, but what I typically do is I say, okay, where did this first occur historically? In other words, before writing existed, who's the one that created the ocean? Who's the one that was hovering over the water? And yes, it's true that Moses wrote at a time after that. And yeah, we know that in different polemic source or different sources, you have different religions talking about those factors that are common, probably related to after the Tower of Babel and all that. But I would say that the Bible is orienting you to certain things, and it has a polemic thrust against some of that, because when the Red Sea is split, God, this same God that created everything, is sovereign over all of this, and has brought about this new nation, and this new nation is going into a place of pagan gods, and these people with the pagan gods, they've been influenced, and then you can do a mapping of like, okay, here's the Greek timeline, here's the other culture timeline, here's Israel's timeline, Egypt and all of that, and you can see, all right, at certain times Israel had influence with these different cultures at various times, and the question is, what was God conveying through the scriptures inspired, to those other cultures at that time, or in contrast to them? So you can do. I first started thinking about that around 2004, but I just see more of that. Everything is in the Old Testament. My assumption is this: God gave the Old Testament to understand the New Testament. And yeah, there's an intertestamental time. Yeah, there's other writings that developed and all of that. But really what made this real strong for me is a particular book by Cho, Hermeneutics of the Biblical Writers, because he argues that intertextuality, how the authors in the Old Testament are doing this, and then when you get to the New Testament, they're doing the very same thing. And they're doing something different than what occurred during the intertestamental time. It's like that was a time of famine, that was a time of darkness. And so I think what's happening is that period of time is being skipped over or overlooked, because when John the Baptist comes on the scene, when Jesus comes on the scene, when apostles come on the scene, they're speaking with authority and revelation of God. So while they may be making things in reference to the culture and all of that stuff, they're pulling from the Old Testament theology. And
obviously the Christianity is like a Jewish religion, if you want to say it's like a Jewish religion. I'm not saying it's like a pagan or I'm not saying that.
But there's a Hellenistic aspect to things. I'm not denying that. But then, I mean, around 2005, I read Blasphemy and Manly P. Hall and that type of stuff. And, that esoteric thing. And they want to try to say, well, the Greeks really got it from, the Hindus or the Egyptians. And then, and then when you take a Western civilization or world religion class or world history class, they ask, where did this develop? In Mesopotamia, Indus Valley, all of those types of things like that. So, I mean, that stuff has been on my radar. Now, I kind of gotten away from it over the years. But it's not like I haven't explored them, but I haven't sat down and read all of Philo, If I have to debate somebody one day and it's intensively on Philo, I'll probably be motivated to do that. I just don't know if I'm going to sit down and read Philo.
That's a lot. It's like a 1,000 pages. I can give you snippets of stuff, which I think I have
dabbled in it. I have dabbled in it, but essentially my understanding was he looked at how the Greek mythology the philosophers would say, oh, well, these gods, we got to correct the religion. They can't be really acting like that. And so Philo wanted to protect the God of the Old Testament from certain things, so he allegorized. That was my understanding. But
yeah, the main reason is
you're wiped out, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm done. I've got to go.
Okay.
So y'all continue. I'll probably actually watch some more of this later on because Fallow's interesting.
Okay.
And then you'll find out when you read him, it's not about his particular theories, but again, it's about what he was trying to do in the world at that time and how that's relevant. So, but I'll talk to you
Okay.
later on.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
God bless you.
God bless.
Thanks. See you. Hopefully I talk to you guys or Chris again. I like talking to Chris.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm glad I got super layman so I can understand y'all a lot better. You know, I thought ETT was going to come in here. I thought I was going to wake up, but I guess he came in and he got bored and left. You know.
Yeah.
He says, "Is the chat room open?" Yeah, he could have talked about the thing. You know, he could have. He was welcome to talk, but he left before I could say anything. But yeah, Howdy, I'm probably gonna land the plane, but I'm looking forward to see what kind of shorts come from this one. I don't know if you noticed that in the times that you've been on and you've had discussions, the shorts that the AI makes with like your questions, your challenges, your thoughts, that all comes out. I don't cut. I just go with it because what I'm trying to do, and I might do this differently later on, is I'm trying to take a reporting approach to doing my YouTube shorts. In other words, I'm not worried about the YouTube shorts being correct or accurate. I want them to reflect what actually happens in the stream, you know? And if it's something that challenges free grace or challenges me or refutes me, so be it, you know? Because people need access to truth, you know? And if something is said that is true, then I want people to have it. I want to be challenged by it. I want people to come back and say, yeah, but in this short, you said this, or this person refuted you on this. That puts pressure on me. And it's like, okay, well, I need to deal with this, you know? So I'm thankful for the challenges.
That's where I'm sort of coming from. I'm sort of viewing this is like taking at a point in time in literary history, and there's all these influences coming into it, and then from I guess you would say like a philosophical angle. And so if you ever want to talk about philosophy of anything, pretty much, or the Hellenistic or Athenian side of this story, then
yeah, I thought this San Jose was going to come in too, but he's not about that life, evidently. So I'm probably going to land the stream. I'm pretty tired too. I probably won't go to sleep, but I need to eat something and see what Janet's doing. But thanks, Howdy. I really appreciate your contribution. And Smokey and Chris, you know, I know people bring stuff about Smokey, but thing is, regardless of whether something's true or false, the reality is that Smokey's on a journey, and the world benefits from Smokey being brought back into the faith, at least in my view. You know, not everybody's going to look at the same, but so my personal view is that if you shun, you ostracize somebody that's already viewed as an outcast, you typically don't improve their mental state. Everybody needs to be restored to some capacity, you know. Not saying there isn't boundaries and other things like that, but restoration is important. You know, one way to put it is we get hurt through relationships, and healing comes through relationships. So I think with Smokey in particular, the fact that he's married now and has a wife, you know, my pastor, one of the things he mentioned, he would say, you know, one reason the Wild West was so wild because there, you know, wasn't any women. You know, I know there were ones at the brothel or whatever, but the point being is that whenever you have a woman, and I'm speaking in general, but a woman challenges a man, to accept responsibility, to grow in other areas that a man necessarily may not do. And of course, it's not. I'm not saying a man has to be married or be with a woman to be able to grow. I'm not saying that, but I'm just speaking in generalities. I mean, I know how my wife has challenged me way before she was my wife, but so I don't know if people would accept it, but I see growth in Smokey in certain areas. And so I want him to have every opportunity he can to work through these philosophical and theological objections that he has. So I appreciate y'all's willingness to engage with them. All right.
And I'll see.
Go ahead, Happy.
I was just going to say goodnight. It was a good.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me yap all night, son.
God bless. Y'all check out more content, old stuff, new stuff. It's all good. Y'all have a good night.